Hello again.
I dropped it into your Slack channel, so you should see it.
Let me see. Um, nope. Oh, the main Slack channel.
Future text.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Open.
I showed this back in March. We talked about it in the meeting. Hi, Andrew, or he was here. Come back. Morning,
Yeah, no,
Andrew.
I remember the document very well. I just couldn't find it, so just going to open it now.
Also, I found it also in Slack. I had put it in Slack too. It's all right. We have a lot of stuff in Slack.
Yeah, hello, Andrew.
Mark, good to see you, darling. Happy Easter.
Hello, pleasure. Sorry, yes, I managed to have several meetings parked on me at short notice on a Wednesday, which I couldn't escape. So I'm sorry I missed the last two.
That's all right. Good you're here. Good morning, Andrew. You're muted or something. It's headset. Andrew, did you see my link about signing up for the DHSI? I'm guessing that might be yes. Can't hear you.
Mark, you said something. I saw there was a Slack message from you saying, is there non-paywall? But for the life of me, I can't figure out what you responded to. Could you tell me?
That was to the New York Times thing. I was just wondering if there was a sort of, an overview.
Oh, was that by Peter or who posted that?
Sorry, I just
Oh,
thought
Dini, there it is.
Yeah. I just read the long Cory Doctorow thing about I have issues with social networks.
Cory Doctorow.
I think I took away from the thesis is there are trust issues.
Yeah, that's a good a naturally intelligent summary you have there, Mark. That's cool. Oh, Rob is here as well. Oh, fantastic. It's always nice to see you, Rob, particularly today. If you've updated your headset, that is. Let me just get a link for us for our agenda. We do have an agenda, people.
And we love
having an agenda.
We make an agenda we don't like to follow. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I don't think he's there yet. I think he's half there yet. Yeah, Andrew, I saw your demo, obviously, and very nice. You are a consummate manager, managing the desires of Dini and the desires of me. We have colors and JSON all in one beautiful package, just as it should be. I thought that was
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rob.
Sorry, I missed Monday. I had computer issues.
What happened?
Oh, you don't want to know. It was a nightmare.
Okay.
I changed my Google password and it just wrecked everything.
Oh, yeah. That can be a bit much. Okay, what time is it?
I did update the headset to Vision 1.1, I guess.
1.2.
Maybe there's another one.
Was it last night you did it or earlier?
Earlier.
Okay. Because the whole personas thing, if we have time today, while everyone's chatting, you and I could try it if we want. It's supposed to be radically changed. Right, okay.
I fixed the persona. I did that.
Yeah, but these are, it's new personas where when we talk, we're actually sharing space rather than
okay.
So glad that's here. That's going to be, that's
I'm not home. So,
You have it with you?
I don't have it with me.
Oh my God, how can you live without it?
Well,
Weird man.
was taking my constitutional walk on the other side of the campus.
Well, you ended up somewhere nice.
Yeah, but
That's
it's
for
not
sure.
my house.
Right, so I don't know who's coming today. So I think we are a quorum, something I still don't know what it means, but they say it. Please click on the link in the chat for our agenda. And the first thing is what we just did. Just mention the whole vision update thing. It's going to be really interesting to test that. Dini, if you have chance, whenever you're home, just ping me. It would be lovely to test it with you as well.
I want to get out of class. I did not bring it today because I have so many meetings.
Yeah, I bring mine when I have coffee, you know. I showed it to one of my former students today, and she did the thing we've seen every time. Oh, this is really cool. This is neat. The 3D or stereo video, everybody loves it. The environments, they go, wow. And there's never enough time to go into the real stuff. Also, since we're on Vision, Andrew, I have actually got export now. Click the wrong thing. Export in Reader for a JSON. So I'm going to try to share that right here. If you can have a look at it and see if it even remotely looks like what we're talking about.
I mean, it can kind of look whatever it wants because I'm gonna have to build a structure around it. Almost certainly it won't look like the current export that the system makes. Just because it's based on Three.js and it has its own export. Can you guys hear me now? I don't know. Did my mic get fixed?
You
That's
can,
fine.
you can.
I didn't change anything. I don't know why it wasn't working earlier.
Oh, it's the internet, the world. Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted you to have a look at it so you could tell me to tell them if there are any obvious changes to make, cheap changes early on in this thing. It's not a big thing.
I do see some like weird non-symbols, like it's like the paragraph break symbol is part of the text in here. Is that intentional? Are you using that for some reason?
We use that for breaking in when we have a defined concept that comes up in a dialogue, and we use that to do line breaks there. And we also use it in the visual meta to control the line breaks better there, where they are
Okay.
not rendered.
So like title has them on both sides.
Okay.
Which
Right.
is fine. I'm just curious what they were for. But
Yeah, no, I saw BBEdit report to that to me. So these are the things we just need to report back to them. But there's no urgency. I just wanted you to have a thing. Then you
cool.
work
Yeah.
more on your thing, and then we go back to that.
I think I can just ignore those. I'm not sure. It may register title differently, but as long as they're always there, I can work around it.
It's more important that you are happy. So if they need to change something, they should. So that's easy. So thank you for having a look. Dini, did you want to mention briefly our Sunday presentation?
Yeah, we went to this wonderful group of people. They're not academics. It's straight just WebXR, aficionados. And it was at noon on our time. Took place in this virtual environment. We're all like little bobbleheads bopping around this virtual space. That part was kind of goofy, but it was good. I mean, it was our first presentation, so I think it was a great way to start. Frodo made some slides that we shown on this kind of virtual projecting system. It was well received. In fact, one of the people that were there came on Monday, which I thought was great. So I thought it was a good way to start our working together to do presentations. Informal group, very receptive. They had not had many academic kind of people in their group before, so it was a meeting of two different environments, two different kinds of people, users. Good.
What were they mostly interested in?
WebXR is a WebXR group.
Creating environments?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Developing WebXR systems, environments, experiences. So it was just basically production people, coders, programmers.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was a good. So that was in Mozilla Hubs, which used to be quite a cool place to make your own environments. But the tools just, my brain just didn't work for it. So that's a real shame.
It was cool at the time, right? I mean, that's the thing with when we first were playing in those kind of spaces. Well, shouldn't say that. It wasn't cool. Second Life was cool. When we came back to, I don't know. I mean, this is something we could talk about later, but the history of VR and virtual spaces. I mean, we had some cool spaces back when we didn't have the tech to do them right, but we still did them right. And then we started making these kind of spaces that were like, it's like a step backwards. So I need to take a little bio break and I'll be back and talk about the Monday Book Club. I'll be right back.
The Monday Book Club.
Hi, Brandel. I just put the agenda in there. Yeah, Deanie has a nice idea for what to do over the next few weeks. Yeah, so yeah, we have the agenda that we're going through. Brandel, I have 1.2 beta Vision OS. It means two things. I have test flight again. I can test my own software now.
Oh, that's very exciting.
And I got an email from Apple saying they want to know rights and things because they want to promote Author, which is lovely. But at some point, it'd be nice to do a call with you and FaceTime because now the spatial FaceTime is on here. So how
That's really
cool. You have to tell us about it now that you can. It's been like secret stuff.
It's not a thing I have much awareness of. Honestly, I work on the web. And so I know that you can actually get the persona picture as a texture within the web, which is
Oh,
pretty cool.
really?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's noticed. And that's and I have used it. But one of the things about being an internal developer and even actually being an authorized external spokesperson is that I'm authorized to talk about certain things and other things I don't know what is known because as a developer, as an engineer, I have necessarily things that I can look at, ways that it works that aren't necessarily what the public has. So I don't know. One, I'm not actually able to do any FaceTimes.
No, that's fine. It's just
And two, I don't know. I don't know what it actually is or isn't in contrast to what people on the inside have.
Sure.
So I'm afraid there's not much I can say about it, but it is really exciting. I was honestly confused when it wasn't spatial. So for people in the public, so it's a relief to get it out there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I did not know that the textures were available on WebXR, so that probably obvious to others, but not to me. That's really cool.
No, not in WebXR. They're available in the web, so you can. There's no current agreement or standard for having a forward-facing camera available within a WebXR session, because there's not been a device where that would even make sense to have a front-facing camera on your face until and unless it's a synthetic one. So, it's a very interesting thing to kind of pursue and look at, but it's not something where the details have actually been hammered out on what that means and where it ought to be supported and things like that. So, in the same way that iPad removes the visibility of that stream when a window is not open, the same thing may happen in WebXR today. That's not necessarily long term, the position that it's going to land, but that's what it is.
Right. Yeah, well, that's really good to know. That's good to know all both sides of that. Thank you. So yeah, the agenda, Sunday book club. No, Monday book club. What is that, Deanie?
Well, Frodo's going to be kind of out for 2 weeks in Japan. visiting family, which is great, an opportunity for him. But I was thinking that we've not really had time to do much of the more esoteric, philosophical, theoretical discussions about virtual reality and, dipping our toe deeply into this world. Be nice to get some of this under our belts. It's been a while since I've read Benedict's book, for example. There's a lot of really good literature out there that starts from even the 80s and 90s. And I thought it'd be fun to pull a couple of articles out, scan them and drop them into our Slack channel, and then we could talk about them for an hour for 2 Mondays in a row from 9 to 10 o'clock. So not 8 in the morning, just the second hour, spend an hour, talking about these articles. If you're interested, if you're not, fine, I get it. But I think it'd be kind of fun to read these with some folks, 'cause it's been a while since I've read these articles myself. Anybody interested? Any takers?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the literature, so that would be neat to be able to spend some time with it and do some discussion.
Great. How about you, Rob?
Yeah.
You're my
Yep,
guinea
if I have time.
Mark, great. Okay, then I'll pull something up tonight, and we'll start with just maybe something from the Benedict book. Came out, very wonderful volume of collection of articles by some good thinkers, and it was kind of a seminal text when it came out. So I'll pull that up, and I'll also look at a few other articles. So and I'll drop them into the Slack channel. We can vote to see which one we want to look at, and go from there. Okay. Thanks. Be fun to read with academic and people that are smart. I read so much myself. And John, my husband's not interested in this stuff at all. So it's like I talked to him about this, and he's like, "Oh, okay." All right. So case studies.
I just added an announcement. If you could please reload, I apologize. Just 2 things in terms of timing. Number 1, as I put in the chat here, I will be available just at a different time as you've gotten emails. Because 5 a.m. in Japan is the earliest I can really do, which is 1 p.m. Pacific. But also, there is the thought of having a Future of Text social this summer, most likely in June, where there will be no public book, no symposium, no talking. It'll just be from Friday till Monday, or whatever time within that you might have in London, for those of you who would like to do that, if it's convenient. And I just expect those of us who are around will talk about this stuff to some degree and just have a good hangout time. I know that some of the Europeans are up for this. I'm hoping Leon at least, and Mark at least, and if the rest of you can, that would just be golden. So just
What-
something to consider.
what dates?
I don't even know the dates yet. Once there's a little bit of, if you have some dates you might be able to do it, just please email me. And then based on what a few people say, I'll try to make a jiggle and see what happens. Very, very loose at this point.
And Frode, can I mention that there's been some discussion about GitHub and not getting access? So Greg's here today, and I'd like to get this taken care of. So if anybody wants to get into the GitHub repository and you haven't been able to, but we have gotten your email address, please give us the email address that you are using for the GitHub repository. And then if you want me to, I can have Greg just open up the repository, period.
The thing is, the link that Peter was referring to on Slack, I clicked on it too, and it also was not found. So I think it's maybe just the link itself that's incorrect. The one
No, the link is fine because I can click on it and get access as long as I'm logged in. If I'm not logged into that account, it's a 404.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, fine. Well, then, yeah, that's exactly what you said. All right, good to know.
All right. So does everybody have access to GitHub so they can log in?
Not Peter, but he's not here today, so please add Peter again.
What is Peter's address? The one that I used, he's obviously not using. Which one does he want to use?
I don't know. I'll email him and copy you.
That'd be great. Thanks. Okay. And how about, wasn't it also, not Adam, who else was trying to get into it? Fabienne.
Yeah,
Give me-
I'm not sure. Hang on, he's busy, but he's available to
I also added my email to the chat. So yeah, then
You too.
hopefully
Okay.
I will be able to access it.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll get that added. Greg gets in at 9 o'clock, so I'll get him to start that. As soon as he's here.
I think, Deanie, it may be just simpler just to make it public if Andrew is okay with that, considering that's where we're headed anyway.
Andrew?
Yeah, I don't mind. It's not like this is something that's going to be out there getting advertised. So it's not like anyone's going to find it.
Okay, I'll
Sesame,
tell Greg to make it
Sesame, open up, or something like that. Maybe not Sesame. Okay, so. Right, okay, so we'll open it up then. I mean, you will ask for it to be opened up, right, Deanie?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay,
All
and
right.
then indeed we go to the use cases and case studies.
I had already posted about this before, but I'll reiterate what I'm working on right now. So let me pull this document up. Most of you, I think, have seen it. I dropped it into Slack. Some of you might have seen it there.
Yeah, we have seen it, but today we decide on exactly what we're doing, right? So that's exciting. And I'm just going to give them a fresh link so they can see what, because I put it on the webpage. Okay, Danny, please go ahead. Now the link is up, I can be quiet.
I'm going to do a screen share. As I mentioned, I usually start with a research question. And the question that I'm starting with is, what is the effect of XR upon 3 common academic tasks? Now, this is not the only things that academics do, but in fact, I can come up with a list of maybe 20. But these are the 3 that I think are the most prominent. First, preparing to write an academic article. And that could include an article for a book, right? So it's writing. Secondly, editing review articles for an academic journal, which I do all the time. And thirdly, assessing a graduate seminar paper. Right now, I'm an external reviewer on a dissertation on AI from Simon Fraser University. I have a PDF that was sent to me, and I can't freaking do anything with it. I can't mark it. I can't do anything with it. I printed it out. Now I'm writing on it, right? So it's a real problem for academics to work with PDFs on these kind of things. But anyway, so specifically, does XR enhance or improve the quality, effectiveness, and efficiency of these 3 tasks, and in what ways? So this is going to be divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is the ways in which these activities are undertaken given the constraints and affordances of computer tools I'm currently using. As I mentioned, that PDF that I received, 150 pages of PDF for dissertation on AI, that it's impossible to work with. So it's important that I lay out the difficulty with dealing with that environment in a 2D space. The second part is the ways in which these activities can be undertaken in XR currently, and then what can I do with it now in a Vision Pro or Quest 3? And not a lot right now. But third, what is gained by expanding the tools? What can we do? What can I imagine it looking like? And already we're heading those directions. This photo was showing on Monday, having a place to be able to write in marginalia, being able to link to things. That's what I'm imagining will be much more useful. I actually want to manipulate that PDF. I want to work with those words. I want to look back. So there's something like 7 pages of references, but they're separate from the text itself. How can I check that reference in the midst of reading that text so that I don't have to go through the pages and pull up those references? There's got to be a better way of doing this. And Mark, I know you're working with Frodo right now on his dissertation. It's just impossible to work in this environment effectively. And it's so much different with print. If I print it out, I can do stuff. I can lay things out on the table. I can mark things up. I can, put little sticky tabs places. So when I go into that exam and I have to examine that candidate in April, I have my sticky notes all over this thing and I can just pull. They're color coded. Can we do something better than that in XR? So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about for this case study. I'll stop there. And Mark, you can be very helpful with this too,
Well,
because you're doing it.
I have a thought actually. I mean, one of the things, just doing, fun enough, some sort of review work at the moment, is that one of the things I realised is that that I think we miss when we talk about annotations is they have different purposes. So it's the way you see it normally is this really low hanging, let's do corporate north, south, east and west and all have different, and that's, I don't know, that's fine in Office, but it's not useful. For instance, you may want different streams of annotation. You might be annotating something that's already annotated, and you need to be absolutely certain that the annotations that you're making are not admixed with the others. So they're separately addressable. They can be displayed and hidden separately, because again, sometimes what you're putting in there is obscuring what's there. And silly things like not being able to use a spell checker inside annotation notes. Why? It's just a text space. So what that tells me is the people who implemented these sort of things way back didn't really think that this was a toy they gave you to make you go away, and why not use a sticky, print it out and put a sticky on it. And that's about where the sophistication is. Whereas if they were treated more like first-class text objects within the document. And I very much call with what Deanie said. You sort of, in a sense, you want what you might think of as the paper document, almost as like the sort of performative substrate in the middle. But it's only one of the players in the whole process. All the real action is happening. You're basically consuming on that. But you're probably not writing back to it, because if you were, you'd be editing the live piece. And there are all sorts of reasons not to do that, not least of which it might not be your own to edit. So I think that's really interesting. And what's more, I think all of this actually has use in a wider context. But I think the sort of the academic reading and writing thing is a place where it can get beaten up quickly, much more easily into something more usable, and then shown to people who probably at first sight will understandably say, yeah, but so what? And then find that actually, no, they can do things, because in a sense, we all end up in some way annotating or editing stuff for all sorts of reasons, and not necessarily even for work.
Thank you. And as I mentioned before, when we had this discussion, there's indexes already, right? There's already an index in a book. I re-index them. I make my own index because I have my own way of thinking, my own language. I have my own needs. I know what I'm looking for specifically. And I don't want to look at, 10 pages of index that mean nothing to me. So I re-index things so that I can quickly pick up the book, turn to the cover, and look for that item in my own index. Rhoda?
I think this is very important, but we're talking about many different things. So if you please click on the link I just put in, which is where I put what you wrote, Deanie. If you all click on that on our webpage. On the top, I've added some questions that are kind of important. The first one is, what corpus should we work on? Because when we talk about books and we talk about a very long dissertation, that's very different from ACM articles. So today is when we decide which of those things we're going to work on for now. Because there'll be very different affordances for very different types of material, obviously.
Will they? Could you explain a bit more as to how you think they differ?
Yes, ACM articles tend to be not a lot of pages. A book has a lot of pages. So that means that just in terms of dealing with the volume, it's different. And also, if for instance, a lot of these things have nothing to do with XR in itself. There would also be problems when dealing with them on a normal computer screen, such as how to view the references while you're reading. Of course, we have our own kind of proprietary system in reader author, but even with a normal ACM article, one thing that could be done, you duplicate the article, you have the reading on the left, for instance, and the references on the right, so you could do that. So if you want to build affordances for a book and different kinds of literatures, I think the use cases will be different.
I think my case study paper already defines the length. We're looking at an article. So for example, let me put my hand down here in a second. Drives me crazy when this little thing shows up. Okay. If you look at my question, writing an article, that's not a book. That can be a 3-page, could be 10-page, but I'm writing an article. Editing review articles. So those are usually 750 words for Leonardo. So it's usually maybe 2 pages, 3 pages, right? 250 words a page, 3 pages max. Now the graduate seminar paper, that can be anywhere from 7 pages to 30, depending on the topic. So I've already defined the length. It's going to be not a book, right? Yes, Rhoda?
So we're not focusing only on ACM then?
No, and in fact, as we were talking, I just had a brainstorm, right? Brain flash. Since we're going to have this Monday morning book club, and we're going to start with something that's, from the past that talks about theoretical issues with VR. And we're going to look at how we think about VR today. Then let's make that the case study. Let's put that in the case study. And it's going to be something that I scan. If I scan it, it's going to be a PDF. So we start with that. The next week, we can look at an HTML. We can do one of each.
I mean, if you want to do that for your book club, of course, you can do what you like for that. But in terms of where we should put our focus for what kind of affordances to build and the coding that Andrew's going to, I think we have to be really clear with the use case. We have 3 important use cases here that you have written down. Editing review articles for an academic journal. What is...
Those are PDFs. Those are always PDFs. Everything is always PDFs. Well, I shouldn't say it. The review articles come to me as Word documents, and then I have to send them back to Leonardo as an RTF. But they're still not web pages. I love the idea. So let me just step back and say, I love the idea of working with web pages. I do. And I hate PDFs. I say this with every fiber of my body. I fucking hate them. Andrew knows how much I hate them. That said, everything I do academically is PDF. So if you're talking about people like me, you're talking about PDFs. Now, can we strip the PDF out of there and just have the words separate from that? Is there a step we can take to strip it out of PDF and move it in HTML? Okay, but that's not what this project's about.
I thought it was, because ACM has started doing HTML as well. So I thought that we were doing reading PDF and where HTML is available, then we can have special views for that.
Okay, then you just answered your own question.
No, I'm not. No, I'm saying what I
I'm
thought.
not trying to be ugly. I'm just saying that's exactly, that makes sense. Mark has his hand up. Mark, you know something we should...
Well, on the last point, the factoid is that ACM HTML became available from 2020, as far as I'm 2021. Sorry, I think it is, as far as I'm aware. So it certainly doesn't go back beyond that. It might even start later, and only some of the existing corpus will do it, because it depends on whether any given journal or conference chose to use the infrastructure that allowed it to happen. So, but it's where they're going, because ACM said, well, as of this year, they won't send you anything in print. They'll send you a PDF and you can print it out for yourself. Which is a good thing, actually, with Planet. But I put my hand up really so that I'm not sure I really do see a massive distinction in terms of the formats. I think it's terribly easy to get lost in the sort of the performative layer of the layout. Actually, they're all just like, I think the thing is, that's one of the things we need to sort of take into account. It's just a layout. And to a certain extent, if we treat publisher X and publisher Y as being some totally different thing, we'll not be helping ourselves. They just have different weird and random ways of doing stuff, but it's broadly the same. They don't, it's a bit like anyone. We don't all use every tool in the drawer, but we probably use most of them, and we probably use the ones we do use in a slightly different way. But as long as I don't use a hammer to drive in screws, broadly a hammer is a hammer. So I think it's the fact that we've started using the ACM corpus and we have access to some documents to it is useful, but I don't think we should sort of constrain ourselves artificially to that being the horizon, because I think that will weaken our insight. The truth is, what we have to hand to work with is ACM, so I suspect it will figure heavily on what we do, and in that way, it's a sort of quasi constraint. But I'm sort of eager not to make it more of one than we need it to be. Thanks.
Roddy, had your hand up?
No, go ahead.
I want to say that last year, let me put this down. Okay. Last year, when I was working with Rob Swigert on that article for ACM Hypertext on VR, I did a literary search review for any article about VR published by ACM. And I did not find anything. There's a couple of ones that mentioned VR, but they really weren't about VR. So that was an interesting thing. So Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I found nothing that was about specifically about VR in a hypertextual environment, except the things I wrote outside of ACM. So if I'm going to do a case study and I'd like to do it on something about VR, then I can't use the ACM library. It's going to be something more about hypertext. And your article on 7 types of hypertext would be a nice guinea pig for that. But I think it'd be kind of fun to do an article, to do this case study on VR that is a PDF. And then we can then also, if we wanted to, Rhoda, strip it out and make it HTML and make that something we do also. Let's start with the PDF, because we do mention in the Sloan Foundation that we're looking at text, and we do mention PDFs as kind of like the major thing. Not that I'm married to it, believe me. Thank you, Brandel. Yeah. So comments, Mark.
I just thought it's annoying that Hypertext didn't use the TAP system last year, because to get an HTML version of my paper, I will have to create it. And I perhaps over provisioned it with references, but there you go, right from my own back. But that aside, yes, we could do that. I thought, I don't know if people have seen it. Fabienne, I saw a post email from her earlier, sort of commenting on this subject of what did he call it? But basically use cases and things. And I thought he made an interesting point that a key thing really to understand is the sort of chicken egg of what we want to do and what we need to have to be able to do it, rather than get too wound up in boundaries and implementation and sort of basically jurisdictional stuff, which doesn't particularly help us. And I think that plays strongly to me insofar as the thing I find myself, the thing that makes me want to use XR, in fact, the only thing that would really make me use XR to do work as opposed to play at the moment, would be document deconstruction. So the real question, and I think this is where it has become necessary and pertinent to look at web pages, not so much because it's HTML as opposed to something else, but it's text in a more fluid, more tractable, more restylable fashion. It's not PDF's fault that it is what it is, but it also is sort of problematic. But I don't want to. I wouldn't want to look at it in that frame. I don't think it's useful to look at it in terms of winners and losers. The most useful thing is to sort of say that, okay, well, what more would we need to do, say, for instance, to a PDF to make it as flexible as something we can do using HTML as a proxy, for sake of argument. I think we have to be mindful too about just how much more we stick into PDFs. I mean, if a PDF is a document with with about 7 different representations inside, at some point someone's going to say, well, isn't this unnecessary duplication? I think that's something we should also be mindful of, because PDF actually is as I understand it, is essentially a portmanteau. So a bit like a TIFF, you can put in basically whatever you like, as long as it abides by the rules of the format. So you can put pretty much everything, and indeed some early PDFs are just a photo in a PDF wrapper. There's no real text there at all. And I think there's a sort of lesson in that. So if we want to have additional metadata in there, we need to think actually whether the degree to which we're creating unnecessary duplication. I mean, the annoying part is if I was going to get one bit, I get rid of all the damn PostScript. I don't want the typesetting in that. I really don't. But you know, it's there, so we'll live with that. But I think this. I was thinking. I mean, I made some visual meta for my thesis, and it was 105 pages of 4-point. And I don't think that passes the sniff test with the general public. So I don't say that because it's something against visual meta. This was more a wake-up call to self, saying, okay, well, we need, there's a bit more optimization to do here somewhere, and I don't know how to deal with that.
Mark, that's great. And I just wrote down as you were talking, PDF is not the future. That's not the future. That could get us, I don't want to get us in a different direction of this grant at all. But I think one of the things that might come out of our exploration is that fact. We can say, okay, we've done this with PDF. It doesn't work well. What works better is HTML. And we're recommending to the academic community that they begin to think about the format in which they produce things. And to be honest with you, if we're not going to print anything out anymore, then we don't need PDFs. PDFs were meant to stratify, to sustain formatting across systems, right? I mean, it really was a way to kind of tamp things down and hold it in place. Because as you know, if you make a Word document and you make it on your computer, if you send it over the net to me, the formatting could get all whacked out. It happens to my students all the time. They send me their resume project. It's supposed to be one page. It's one page on their computer, and when I receive it, it's a page and maybe 2 lines. So the formatting is all whacked out in Word. So that's why academics love PDFs, because once we say it's this, no matter what happens, it comes to me as that. That said, we're not going to be using email in the future like we're using it. We're not going to be doing these kinds of systems. So what is it that's going to be the future? So the future of text next year, Frodo, might be an interesting thing to think about is, okay, so we've done this work with this future tool called XR, right? And we've discovered that PDF is not the future. What is the future of text in this VR environment? That the actual object of text. And I would argue it's not PDF. Mark, hand up.
Oh, well, Leon, go first. I've spoken already. Leon, please.
Leon, please.
Yeah, I have a small question. I'm a bit puzzled because PDF and HTML is both used by the academic world, universities, everybody uses it. For some reason, PDF seems to be more used for serious, or let's say papers, or so. What it almost seems like PDFs have more somewhat like a stone tablet quality to them.
Yes.
Perhaps that makes it also annoyingly hard to edit. It's more a read-only thing. Yeah, I'm just thinking, if HTML was created by academics, then hasn't there been some attempt to turn it into a stone tablet as well? I mean, it's completely fluid, I understand that, but yeah, the only thing I can think of is, for example, IPFS, where an HTML document has a sort of like unique address, and you cannot overwrite it. I could imagine that as a stone tablet, but isn't there something already years ago when hypertext was invented, the HTML version, that there was some kind of way to lock it, or sort of to where the author could say this is the final version? Wasn't this invented, and why is it not used then?
That's such a
It's
great,
invented.
I love that. Thank you for that. So the reason why HTML is not the go-to formatting for academics is that most academics can't work in HTML. I mean, only a handful of us, I'd say in America, It's computer scientists, people in the digital humanities like I am, media art. It's like small group of people, right? Everybody else is working in PDFs. And so that's part of it is just being able to know how to use and work with HTML. But the second thing is HTML is fluid. It's constantly changing. And at the time, now we're getting into the philosophy stuff that turns me on. There's this idea that when you write something down, it is a stone tablet. This is the truth, right? 7 types of hypertext. This is the truth, right? I'm writing this down. It's published. It's been vetted. Everybody, in fact, it's won an award. This is the truth. But the fact remains, every time I write something down, every time I think I've done something, I find new data, the notion of new knowledge, and it's coming at us so fast that Mark might have to do a second edition of that article. We call it editioning, right? So we edition articles all the time. We edition books all the time. With HTML, you can track that, right, through the code. You can actually track the changes through versioning. We call it versioning in HTML, additions in text. My lab has been working on the kind of like the stabilizing notion of versioning HTML, or versioning digital text. But that's such a rare thing. Not many people are thinking about that. And what helps us to be able to even make sure that the HTML has been changed or not been changed is to go back to the Wayback Machine. And you can check the veracity of a website by looking at that same site with that same URL on the Wayback Machine and see the changes. So there is an apparatus already in place, thanks to archive.org, that tracks websites over time. And you can get a snapshot over years of that and months. But putting that together into a concept that is usable across academics, it's not happening yet, Leon, but it should. And this is something that I think would be a useful discussion to have as we play out this project. And I'll now turn over to Mark and Frode.
So to pick up a couple of points, say, because that Leon raised, I mean, I'd sort of put it like this. I never underestimate human laziness or greed. Greed in the sense of money. So the laziness part is it's more work to do something in HTML now if you're just used to maybe writing a Word document. And bear in mind, a lot of people, even today, are still working in a system where, although they're working at a PC or a Mac, they're sort of still in a secretary-driven world. So you do your bit, and then magic stuff happens behind the curtain that you don't do. We're probably not in that group, but we're quite atypical in that. So there is no incentive for someone who just gets stuff done in Word to do something better. It's not better for them, it's worse for them, because they've actually learned something. They've got to do extra work at this point to do it. So there's that pushes against it. The cost and greed thing is, my remembrance is the thing that really got PDF off the ground was the American court system went in absolutely feet first quite early on in PDF and literally turned around and said to people, you can't get through the doors with paper, PDF only. And that helped kickstart a whole sort of the whole thing of enterprise tools. There's this whole area of software that we don't see that starts with the price of we can't tell you. You know, if you need to ask, you can't afford it. That works at enterprise. But a lot of what that's doing was also driven by the fact that people had massive warehouses full of 50 years worth of invoices, and that's what they were trying to. So that's one of the things they're trying to get rid of. So there are a lot of factors playing in on this that aren't sort of strictly affecting what we're doing, but explain why some of these things last. And I think it's also the case that we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there is value in having, in a sense, a copy of record. Now, whether the copy of record is fixed typographically or only in the nature of what is written is perhaps up for grabs. I think most people's expectation today, if you ask them, would be, I mean, for instance, if you buy a house, you probably don't want someone to render it in a copy of CSS Zen Garden. I mean, it might look pretty funky, but you'd probably be worried about how fixed your contract was. So we're in a transitional phase, and what we're doing slightly is pulling against the drogue of people basically not doing what they don't have to do because they don't need to. And I don't mean that in a sense of ill will. It's just that why would you, if you didn't have a need, change something that, as far as you're concerned, works? I think what's really interesting about what we're doing here is we are looking at a place where it doesn't work, and we can begin to explain why. It doesn't mean it's all for naught, and there's a vast, 30, 20 years worth of PDFs that aren't going to go anywhere fast, because I doubt anyone's going to pay to effectively remediate that body of work. Some of it, yes, but most of it, no. So we had to be practical on those things. But at the same time, I don't think that the difficult part is to accept that as a sort of status quo, but not feel bowed down in front of it such that you can't change anything, because we just can't get the process otherwise. And I think the potential affordances of and the malleability of the XR space really offers something, both for really creative work and for something that we might consider quite workaday. But it's going to need a more flexible format, and I don't think any of us yet know quite what it is. None of the things that we have quite work for it, because none of the things we have were designed for it. I mean, HTML wasn't designed for this either. HTML is useful at the moment because one of the things we discovered after the last sort of couple of years of the precursor XR stuff we did here in the Future of Text is it's probably the easiest way to move text in and out of the sort of the XR space, other than it's sort of compartmentalized into a predefined document. But it just wasn't made for this. And before I get, sorry, one last thing, and I'll see the floor. I'll get to a question Leon asked. Is another problem with things like HTML is they never went the full distance of really bothering to embrace issues that exist in the sort of the highest form of our writing, in factual writing as opposed to literature, in terms of things like endnotes and footnotes and references and bibliographies, which are fantastically complicated. They are deconstructable, they could be done, but the people who wrote HTML, that wasn't their problem. And it has been interesting to see looking at the ACM HTML now, that they've obviously put some effort into making all the links go backwards and forwards, because they realize that, for instance, you're going to have the same problem in HTML as you have in a PDF. You look at a reference, you go somewhere, now where do you get back to where you were? That's a non-negotiable want from the reader. It's a non-negotiable fail at the moment from most of the tech, but I know we're addressing that. Dini.
Yeah, thanks. Great. I have students coming in 5 minutes. I'm just going to say this really quickly. Leon, you made a good point about, weren't there ways to keep hypertext much more stratified? And the answer is yes. That was called a platform called StorySpace, HyperCard. I mean, when Mark published After the Story, he published After the Story, and I can't go in and change it, right? It is what it is. That said, there's 18 editions of After the Story, because every time a new platform, a new operating system would be introduced, or upgrades to the technology, with the loss of a CD-ROM drive, he had to redo After the Story. So I have 18 editions of it. So even that wasn't as sturdy as we thought it could be. I do want to mention one other thing that I think is also important to notice, to think about, is that academia is an institution, and the whole point of an institution is stability. Is intellectual stability, right? And that's our job, is to be stable and to say this is truth, this is knowledge. The problem is we're living in a time when truth is evolving. It's a series of evolving facts based on the knowledge at hand. And 100 years ago, knowledge at hand would change at a very slow rate. So you find a rock and it's 10,000 years old, and maybe and that would get published. It'd take 2 years, 4 years to get that out into the academic world. And then another rock would be found that's 20,000 years old, and that changed everything about the 10,000-year-old rock. But that would take decades. Today, things are changing in the moment. And so the whole idea of truth being wobbly is very upsetting to the public. It's caused us to lose respect and faith because knowledge at hand is going to be changing. It isn't the basic idea of intellectual pursuit. And so the PDF is kind of a false thing because it says, this is truth. It's published, it's been peer reviewed. Everybody agrees with it. It's an ACM, for God's sakes. It's such a prestigious organization. They're not going to publish crap. But then, you know, Mark might find there's eight, you know, hypertext uses, and he's going to have to redo that article. He's just top-sided his whole premise, and he's turned upside down the notion of ACM being a stable organization with stable ideas. There is no stability. And I look around the room and I'm looking at tables and chairs and things. And if we really had the ability to do it, we'd see that these things that seem so stable, that the desk that I have my hand on, this is moving as I put my hand on it because molecules are moving. I can't discern that right now, but it's a truth. Nothing is stable. And we can't grasp that. And when we do, it makes us crazy. So what we're suggesting will make people crazy. It doesn't mean there's no truth. It means that truth is only what we know in the moment. There's some universal concepts, thou shalt not kill, but even that is wobbly because if someone comes to my house with a shotgun to kill John, you know that I'm going to cap that guy in his knees, right? I mean, there are things that are always going to push against what we think of as truth, and that's horrible. It's horrible. Anyway, I'll stop because I've got to open the doors for students, but Frode.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, it would have been really good if we stayed on topic and talked use cases, not the old HTML PDF discussion. But I don't think academia is concerned with truth, and I'm the least academic here. I haven't even got my degree yet. I think academia is based on dialogue, and you can only have real dialogue when you are able to refer to something, and that's what citations do. And that's why we have to look at a timeline. Things will change, absolutely. But the problem with HTML is HTML is just plain text with external needs. There's nothing there in an HTML document, right? Other than plain text, there's nothing there. It must have external resources. PDF is also plain text, but it can also afford a layout. And when you publish a PDF, the whole point I see of a PDF is it isn't going to change. That means if someone cites it to say, this is not how I see it, or new evidence has come, you have that PDF to refer to. But if you have an ever-changing, like Google Docs, if you have an ever-changing document or a Word document being sent back and forth, you can't cite it. So you lose your history. I think that's a real problem. Like we should have flexible views, but we shouldn't not have the ability to store things.
Well, I think this discussion has been very fruitful, and this is the kind of stuff I think just getting into the nuts and bolts of this is important because the case study needs to be focused on one thing or another. And I suggest that we do PDFs. That said, I don't think PDFs are the future. They're not the future of text in XR, especially. But we can't say that until we prove it. Leon.
What's the alternative then, Dini, do you think, to PDF for the future?
For academic, I mean, you're talking to an academic. For an academic, nothing. PDF is what we're using. That's the problem.
No. This is a discussion that's really, really important to stop having because we've had it so many times over the last few years in the community in different forms. And if there's a viable alternative to PDF, mention it, bring it up, let's talk about it. If there isn't, this really is a waste of time. Today, you know, we have things to do. We all are very busy. So often it comes up. And, you know, when I had a meeting with the ACM Digital Library Board, and there was also someone there saying PDF is horrible, it's not the future. And I also then say, yeah, you know, there's a lot of things to criticize, but what's the alternative? And they said, we have no idea. Right? If
Yeah.
we don't-
But we have the opportunity of coming up with that. I've got to go. I've got my students here, but Leon, I hate missing what you're going to say. Can you say what you're going to say?
Yeah. Well, how fast? Or I just wanted to say the reason why this comes up, I think, Frode, is that I think also we are mixing up use cases of the fast documents, let's say editing, linking, blah, blah, like we are used to in HTML. And we are sort of conflating that with stone tablet-like documents, for example, PDFs, which they are no longer text, literally. They are turned into zeros and ones, and it's a binary format. And so to have I think, a more easy discussion about these things without falling into the file format trap is, I think, maybe first identifying which type of editing you want to focus on. If it's more the fast editing a word or a grammar mistake or a link here and there, like you can do with HTML, then that's a certain direction you could go for in XR. But if it's more like the stone tablet PDF kind of, which is more read-only, then I suggest, I think it's better to isolate certain use cases, focus on use cases like positioning something here or there, but not really editing, because then you kind of like you're bumping your head to the binary characteristics of the data you're working with. So you have to serialize, deserialize. So to put it short, PDF was not designed to be basically liquid. So long story short, I think this topic always comes up because we are sometimes talking about liquid use cases for non-liquid documents. That's what I think.
agree. That's perfect. That's absolutely right on. Thank you. Rhoda, sorry we got on this track again, but I think it is an important issue and we're going to keep hashing it out, I think, for the rest of eternity. But I won't be seeing you. You're heading out to Japan tomorrow. So safe travels.
Thank you. I will be here for every meeting. It'll just be a bit time shifted, but I think for this community, we didn't get to finish the use cases, but I really do think we need to decide that, as I think we have, PDFs are what we deal with. However, if there is an HTML version available, we use it, right? That is really important. Yeah, but also the discussions of the pros and cons, you know, that we have hours and hours of that. And one thing that I think is really wrong in the discussion, I'll do it in one single minute, and that is they're both text, right? But PDF can have images in it. HTML cannot, right? It is always referring to external stuff. It's always somewhere else, right? Or you can do some encoding, but you can't put a video inside an HTML document. Then you'd have I say you're shaking your head, Leon. You have to do funny things, but it's not an HTML page anymore. So the thing is, representation-wise, we're going to be doing WebXR. It's a whole new world, but what we're basing it on, if there is an alternative, we can talk about it. But I want to be able to cite papers. I don't want them to have changed when I come back to them. That's really, really important.
All right. I love you all. Great morning. Got me excited. I've got my students in the room, missing one, but I'm going on to our meeting. Have a wonderful rest of the hour. And Rhoda, I'll see you soon.
Yep. So, yeah, see you later. Thank you, Dini. So
yeah, sorry. Sorry if I derailed the agenda a bit here, but I was just thinking. I was thinking to really think in use cases. Any use case, I bet Andrew has to code, has to, and I'm not gonna mention the word PDF or HTML from now on. Imagine we have the document type poo, and this document type Andrew needs to sort of like implement some kind of use case with. He has to deconstruct this file format. So this is what I also thought was very good about Mark Anderson's mentioning of document deconstruction. So whatever the file format is, it has to be deconstructed in order to be projected in XR. So this deconstruction needs some kind of internal format, and we can say, "No, we don't know. We don't care about what that format is. We only care about use cases." But this is probably not a good start to develop anything with. So there needs to be some kind of internal model of a document, and what I think is that for this internal module or model, this format, since we're in the browser, I think the document deconstruction with HTML as a proxy, what Mark Anderson suggested, could be a very interesting way to, and useful and handy way to sort of like have a document in the browser memory and be able to work with it in XR, its projection of that. So it doesn't mean we have to render HTML. I'm just saying that the internal format of the XR environment, the invisible internal data, document data, can be HTML. So we can basically use it as a database or to store extra annotations. I think that is a very interesting thought, and it doesn't mean that the document has to be exported to an HTML file. This can all just happen in memory, and whatever is being done to this XR, this document in XR, that can be perhaps saved as this metadata can also be stored in this HTML document, maybe even in a different format. Visual meta doesn't matter, but the point is that if you have these two components, like the internal representation of a PDF document and some extra metadata attached to maybe render the annotations or references or links, if you have that, then I think that would allow so many use cases compared to not having this intermediate format in the browser memory and trying to do everything in real time on the PDF object in memory, because I think that would be very slow. So I think a good way to not end up in a PDF vs HTML discussion is to basically say, are we talking about an internal memory format, or are we talking about a real physical file? So I was more thinking about the internal intermediate format.
Okay, and that's how you take someone from Holland, puts them in Hungary, and sends them across the globe with exactly what we need to do. Okay, I would go a little bit further than what you're saying. I put the things down here because, with all due respect, PDF or HTML, who gives a shit, right? There is stuff that exists in the world, what we will use in the library. That's just something that happens. I put in the chat here from our Sloan pitch, which was approved, and it does say different things for different uses. So I think we should do, and Andrew, you've been listening the whole day, but this particular bit, we need your full brain. I think Leon is 100% right. I think we should have an intermediary kind of a HTML. Doug would call it a X file or something. However, that and the JSON, and please shake your head, Leon, if you disagree, should be virtually indistinguishable. I think that the PDF is two things in this world. One is the raw, plain, look at me, I'm pretty. The second one is the appendix, where we have the initially made appendix, which is Visual Meta in some cases, and then we have the Peter edition of, hello, I'm Visual Meta, you can throw me away, right? So if we just take the best of HTML and JSON, as the technical community here will dictate, fantastic. You know, today, my programmers implemented the ability that I think all of you were in the beginning to export from the library, can export a JSON. That really should be done with what Leon is saying. It should be fulfilling all those requirements. Because who gives a, pardon my honest language again, who gives a shit what the original format is? You know, we should build the most optimal solution. So I'm trying to repeat what you're saying, Leon, without being too boring. I just think we should also store it, not just have it as an intermediary. Andrew, what do you think of that craziness?
So I might have missed earlier, but it seems to me like this was kind of the track we're already on. I'm sort of missing what like the revolutionary concept is from this discussion.
The revolutionary concept is, you know, Dean is relatively new to the community, so she hasn't suffered our PDF HTML fights over the years as much as some people. You know, Mark and I are very battle scarred in that regard. And the notion, it's really an emotional thing. Forget whatever the original stuff is. And for the JSON, it may very well be a good idea to put some HTML in there where appropriate. Because the whole idea is, so we mustn't forget my personal software because it represents any other developer, right? So in my personal reader software, the library should ideally take the citing, to cite that document, the headings for that document, you know, the normal visual meta, but also the entire thing. Because if you encode text in a PDF in a clean column, it's completely extractable, it's clean. Once you do any formatting, it goes haywire. We all know that, right? So all of that should be able to go via the JSON, which is just a sending mechanism, really, to your world and go back, right? It is what we've been talking about. It's just this kind of hang up about HTML versus PDF that got a bit off track. Mark, I'm sure you have a better perspective than that.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I think what coming out from this is something that we've nibbled at here, is that so it's shifting the perception from worrying about the name of where things came from and more about the elements. So it's not just as simple as the JSON or something. It is actually the structure in it as well, because if we do that wrongly, that just gives as Andrew a harder job trying to do what we want with it. So we can say that, you know, something like JSON for, in today 2024 is something that we probably know and understand, and is a common way of putting moving stuff around. But I think where we've been getting lost is that unintentionally we've been looking at how we get this out of the starting formats. And I actually think that is unhelpful at the moment. I really do think we should be thinking about the parts of a document. So imagine the document. So in other words, you know, I mean, for instance, I've often used the word body copy. I don't really like that because that comes from sort of typography and sort of writing sales copy stuff. But there is for instance, there may be a main linear narrative. There's a main section of text. So there are the structures within that. How much of that structure, you know, where does that structure live? I don't know, because it's easy to say, oh well, it just goes in some JSON, and it can. But that's basically, that is punting the difficulty down the line to somebody else. So I don't care. It's an implementation detail. And I think we need to be very careful about that, because what we get at the end of it will be subtly constrained by the misguesses we make. So I'm all for being really quite open and sort of failing early and often at this point, in terms of, okay, so we did that. For instance, we got, for sake of argument, a load of JSON. It turns out that was completely the wrong structure. We had all the right things, just not right in the right order or the right granularity. And I think that will be very instructive to us, because when we have these components, then when we have the notion of these components and what they need to do and why they need to be in the form they're in, then we have a roadmap for both how we may make them from our sort of starting ingredients, these formats whose name I won't now mention, and how we may use them in the XR space.
Yes.
The other thing I would say is we definitely need the VR. The VR definition definitely needs quite a lot of work because it's very open-ended at the moment. And I was finding myself trying to reference something, and unintentionally at the moment, it rather says you can be whatever you like it to be. And I think we need to be a bit not constrictive, but just explain how things might go in. And so, you know, for instance, we talk about it in BibTeX. It is not BibTeX. It is written using typography that looks like BibTeX, but it isn't BibTeX. Because if you put it through BibTeX, it won't work because it's subtly different. BibTeX basically is LaTeX. It's LaTeX compatible, and we don't need ours to be LaTeX compatible. And it doesn't matter right up until the point where it is. So if we're lazy in our terminology and things like that, this is exactly the things where it sort of bites us. If only because it gives the people who want to argue the narrow cause an edge to derail things. So in that sense, we would do well, I think, to revisit what we've written there and tighten that up. I don't think it affects what we have at the moment. It just means that we can be more accurate going forward.
Right. Okay. A few things. So, what's happening here? Something WordPress has been acting up on some of the sites lately. Yes, leave page. So, just a little detail. It does say based on BibTeX. It's not BibTeX. absolutely agree, that's important. Because of your text the other day, Mark, I have now added please note this is only a bit of it and there's a lot more. So
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. We actually need to start writing that out because we're mentioning Visual Meta a lot. We're mentioning it as being quite a core thing. And I think I had reason to go back and look at the site because I was trying to check something the other day. And I thought, yeah, I don't really understand this. I mean, I know because I know what it's supposed to mean, but I wouldn't know from reading this document, is what I'm saying. So it's just a matter of polish.
Yeah, so on what you just said, I've updated our webpage. We have a little bit of stuff now. If you go to XR experiments and then you go to current, you have Andrew stuff that we will have some time to go through. We're not going to do that much on the other stuff. It is here. But if you go to interactions now, this is what I've done. User stories, which is I want to be able to this, that, and the other. And it's beginning to credit some of the people who want to put on things. You know, if you send it to me in a form I can put in, very, very happy to. This is all here because it's just trying to decide which specific interactions to build, right? And they are based on the elements. And I think now because of this guy in Hungary, we should change this sentence to not be from HTML unless noted. I think we should find a really clear way of saying something like detailed metadata in an accessible way could be from HTML, but also extracted from PDF, right? What's the more intelligent way to say that? Because it's really...
Well, I wouldn't mention either I thought the whole point is we're trying not to mention the format, so I'd actually sort of remove that. I mean, it does raise the question. Is Visual Meta an affordance only for PDF? Or is it if it's wider? If it's wider, then we want to rewrite it up. Rewrite it more widely, which doesn't stop us here.
You're right. There's no need to write. I can put it just a line here, but to look at it like that, this is for the discussion. You're right. We moved far beyond.
Well, one interesting challenge, so something we ought to take is to put Visual Meta alongside something else and see how and if we can do that, because that is us eating our own dog food. We actually ought to do it because we do glibly say, well, you can stick with anything, and I suspect that probably is true, but I'm not entirely sure we've actually done that except for PDF for all sorts of good reasons. So it's not that's just a realization that came to me as we discuss this now.
Visual Meta is in the Sloan thing. Let's not forget, right? And Visual Meta is loose now, as loose as possibly can be. All it is saying there's stuff at the end of the document that can be sent separately via JSON. That's all it is.
So that's the point. That's a PDF specific implementation. That's really what I'm getting at.
No, it's not. In a Word file or a HTML or whatever it is, it's just a bit at the end that says what the document is. That's all it is.
Doesn't have to be at the end. I mean,
No, it
we can-
doesn't have to be at the end, but the reason it's at the end is then people don't have to read it, and parsing is faster because parsing will be from the end of the document, not from the front of the document.
so we need, okay, so the point is we need to express it in those terms, because otherwise a wider audience don't get the thought that's gone
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, but Mark, that's important for you and me, not for anyone else.
No, that's the whole point. Is no, it's important for everybody else, not for you. We know. And the whole point I'm saying is exactly the opposite. I couldn't. I'm mistaken. The whole point of saying it is so the
Mark,
wider
we're also-
audience can read that.
We're also running out of time, right? No, let's not do this now. The person who needs to understand this is Andrew and Andrew, right? Basically Andrew, for now, right? We got to nail down some use cases. We just have to do that. So
We had them. We've got 3 of them.
no, they're not.
No.
Hang on. First of all, you said to kind of disassemble a document, which is very useful. That's what I highlighted here. So what are the interactive elements we should at least have, right? I've started listing them. This is probably the kind of stuff we need to agree on that should be extractable, right?
Yes, I mean, I have to sit down and think about that, but yes, essentially, I mean, one thing that's missing there is the actual text.
One sec. What's that?
The actual text, which doesn't seem to be in there,
Hang on.
which is the text as standing separate from the wrapper, the document, the encoding that it comes in.
I have document reading of different sections. That's what I mean by that. Very badly.
Yeah, no, but I think it needs. So one of the things we actually need to come to an understanding of is what the text is and what we mean by it.
No, the full text of the document is the full text of the document, and then we also have to look at the things inside it, right?
Yes, but we need to. Well, funnily enough, but when you talk to people, it's sort of not that. If you copy everything out of some documents, you get all sorts of stuff that you didn't think was the text. So it needs to explain what it means. So, for instance, you need to, for instance, be able to get the text shorn of things like cell copies, running headers and footers, and something which are not. That are part of the document, but are not, and the visual representation of the document, but they are not part of the central text, or they are only some of the text.
Okay.
And we're not yet drawing this distinction. So that's what I was meaning at by the end.
I don't think we need to. These are quote unquote common sense ones. If you do,
They're not. These are really important things to get right. I couldn't. I'm sorry. They are important because otherwise it's a thing we all do it because it's
Mark, can
nasty.
you write the list then? These things are so, when we're talking about the text of a document, if you select text in a PDF and copy it and paste it and it's a bit garbled, that is not the text of the document. That is a technical issue that we have to deal with that has happened during the way. But no one is going to think that things moving around in a way that it wasn't in the original is the text, right? And it would be really, really nice if anybody wants to add to this list, so we can have a more of an agreement of which element should be interactable, right? Andrew has started doing things like that, with the reference section. We need to have an idea. I opened this section because you talked about kind of exploding the document, and I completely agree with you. That is very important. So we need to know what things should be explodable, right?
Yeah, explodes probably an inelegant term. All I was meaning was that whereas if you started from, say, a book from 20 years ago, we might want stuff that we wanted off that substrate. And what are the bits that we can get? What are the bits we want? What are the bits we can get? And are they, for instance, are they the same? Which is what I was driving at when I said, well, actually, we do need to understand what the text is, because we tend to ask for one thing, get another, and then lie the difference. So that there is something in there, and because that gives us the cleanliness that then when we pass we make something, we give some data, for instance, to Andrew, that he gets what he expects. Because one of the things I've really taken on board from a couple of things I've done making some JSON recently is people say, oh, that was interesting. That had basically the gist of it was had far fewer artifacts than I expected.
Okay.
And I find that useful.
Okay, a very important thing is that in the Sloan system, my software is included. Okay, I am an exemplar outsider. So that means that for us to say that the visual meta should be encoded as cleanly as author does, or the JSON should be encoded cleanly, that is a given. We can say that. The point of this is to go to the ACM at the end of it and say, look, if you have clean systems doing this, that, and the other, you can have these results. This is not going to work on old stuff. Leon, please.
How much minutes do we have for the meeting? Because based on that, I will
33 minutes.
33. Okay. Well, I have a question actually. I do like these the focus on use cases, and my concern is performance, and perhaps Andrew can enlighten me a bit. Is it right now engineered in a way that the PDF is deconstructed to a document or a DOM object, and then sort of based on what is in the DOM object is then rendered via Three.js, or is it PDF, some custom JavaScript, which immediately maps to Three.js in basically the XR projection?
Okay,
sorry,
I'm
please.
trying to follow what you're saying there. We don't have technically a PDF as the start. We've got the HTML export of the PDF because of the tagging. So the current JavaScript version that I've written now doesn't even touch a PDF. It just counts on it already being converted into HTML. So it takes an HTML import, and because of all the tagging, it knows what to grab where. And then it maps it directly onto Three.js. So most of it is just in Three.js. The JavaScript itself outside of Three.js is just used for searching through the HTML file, finding the proper tags, and then being like, we want the citation for this test, and it grabs all that.
This is really cool. This is great news because, sorry maybe I'm a bit late to the whole party, but then the whole HTML as an intermediate memory format is there, which is great news because it's highly optimized for searching, querying headers, this or that. This is really like on a low level, like optimized instead of doing everything manually by JavaScript. This also gives us the benefit that if we have more documents opened, DOM documents in memory, we can very easily and very fast query those documents at the same time. So this is really great news. So yeah, so you answered my question, and yes, maybe the conversation is not as revolutionary, and but it has really informed me that I'm fully up to date with what is being done, and I'm very excited by it.
Perfect. Yeah, using the HTML is much nicer on my end because I didn't have to make a whole interpretation algorithm to read through a PDF and try to find everything in the right spots because it's already tagged in the HTML. So if we keep going that route, it'll be easy.
One more thing. This is an idea. It's maybe not useful, but if you have so the PDF gets converted to the internal HTML, and then it might be mutated. It will be edited or some annotations, and afterwards you can also make you can sort of execute a diff between these two, and you can basically see only the changes. And this is really cool for a sort of personal meta base almost of all your documents. Let's say all the metadata which you can personally project on top of the documents instead of saving it to the document per se. So there's two ways to save this edited document. You can save it as sort of in your personal library as annotations or edits, but you can also save it as a new version of the PDF. So that's very interesting. It's connection I just made.
I actually
But,
really like that. Right now, the HTML file is just kind of a read only. We get it, take all the data, and now it's inside the JavaScript, and I do everything else there. It doesn't write it back to the HTML. It has its own export into JSON. But saving it in the HTML would actually be perhaps a better route to go. It wouldn't go to save to the original location because that's not always writable, but it could make a copy perhaps and then save all its information there. And then the export would just be that file back out again with the additional data now saved inside of the HTML tags. So it wouldn't ever show up into anything other than our software that's looking for it. That might be a much better route to go than what we currently have. Obviously that's currently not the way we've built things, but I quite like that. It's just adding an extra step in the middle, but giving us a much more consistent export. Because I had a big pain getting the save and export system working with the way we currently have it, which now is probably not the time for that, but I can talk about it a little bit more when we get to the dev update. Thanks for getting the gears turning, Leon.
Let's go to the dev update. Mark, say what you have to, and we go to the dev update.
Okay, I was only going to say that so I was just thinking on the fact that how doing close linking works if the text is stored within a form like HTML. Not to say it's to be troublesome, but I'm just conscious that a lot of the linking used to work off character offsets within text back in the days when we didn't have rich text, so text was just a string of characters. I'll leave it there. It's just something for us to bear in mind, because when we get to the point where we want to start linking things and doing close addressing, this may be something we need to address.
All right, okay, let's just have a quick look at this then. Because I've just started, I've moved Dini's use case into a research question page. So because what you're saying now is really important, Mark. Blah, blah, blah. The user, once they're in the headset, these are some things they can do, right? One of them is, get rid of this nonsense, is decide on how many pages and all of that. One of them is going to be link. So let's talk through that a little bit. It's crucial to what Andrew's going to do. Create. Okay, since it's reading, copy a citation from a specific section of text, right? What will that mean? I would suggest that a document, okay, to me, and if you don't agree strongly, tell me. If you don't agree weakly, who cares? That's okay. A published document is very different from a manuscript. A manuscript is what you do yourself. You can edit it forever. Who cares? Once something is made public, that's all I mean by published, even just given to friends, it shouldn't be changeable. There should be a new version. But of course, we need to look at versioning and all those cool things in the future, right? But I think that at least for what we're doing now, the document, when you make a new document, should be a PDF with a very rich, extremely extractable visual meta. That visual meta should be exactly what Leon and Andrew are designing now. So that means that when you open up a document from all that metadata and you come across a section on chocolate cake, you should be able to select it, copy a citation, and what you're actually citing is that PDF. So when someone then uses that link in the future, it will reference the original PDF and, to that page if you want to look at it as a page, but it will have all the metadata to recreate the view you saw it in, which is one of the great things about what Andrew has been working on for today. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Okay, we do have one thing we have to clarify, Fode, since we're back to just the age-old, we're using actual PDFs, not HTMLs anymore, so nothing's tagged. Are you going to have in your visual meta something that indicates where the different tags are supposed to go?
Don't forget, visual meta is hardly anything. We can decide that whenever we want. We can decide it right now. We can decide to use XY coordinates. We can decide to use text string and pages.
There's a difference though, because visual meta goes at the end and HTML tagging goes in the middle. So HTML tagging is hidden because it's viewed differently. So if we're talking just using visual meta, we have to come up with a way of basically having the middle tags at the end that reference back, which is possible. I'm just wondering if that's the route that we've decided to go now.
Well,
Um,
let's look at it this way. I'm a couple of stages more naive in this than you are. So I could imagine that one of the visual meta pages is the full HTML of rendering this. But it
That's
has,
going to be huge, though. You're going to
Yeah.
have massive file
funds it?
bloat.
Yeah, that doesn't really strike me as practical. I mean, theoretical, but not practical.
hang on, not with CSS, right? HTML isn't that massive, right? But
But it's
so,
all the text again. You're just doubling the file.
yeah, you are absolutely. Mr. Anderson, how long is the average ACM article for reference?
A standard full article is normally 12 pages. 10, 12, to call it 12 to 14 A4 pages.
So one of the things that I've asked my reader people to do today, because in the Vision Pro headset, and I hope you have a chance to check it out soon, Andrew, and you, Rob, very, very soon, you can have a PDF open to all the many pages, not all, but many, many pages really wide. So I've asked them to not show the visual meta, right? Visual meta is only really useful in readers that know what to do. If it's a human going through, they'll get to a page and see this stuff and they'll stop reading. I mean, I deal with videos and pictures that are gigabytes. To have 100 pages extra, you know, over time, if we do it, software will just ignore it. So I really don't think that is a problem right now. It is not the most elegant, no question about it. But the whole thing of the benefit of HTML for rendering is absolutely acknowledged. There's no question about that. Okay,
Yes.
more quickly and then Leon.
Sorry, no, Leon, go ahead. I've got an idea.
Yeah, just so you know, I just came up with a very low-hanging fruit, easy use case, pretty powerful to implement, based on the fact that PDFs, especially imported ones, don't really change that often. Let's say, especially very significant PDFs, is the fact that the use case of selecting a piece of text in XR, could even be in 2D, whatever. Then it will basically copy a link to your clipboard, and this link basically has the PDF file name plus the which page and where exactly that snippet is. So in other words, if you share that URL, somebody else can open that link in their VR headset and then immediately automatically have that PDF opened on the right page with the text highlighted, basically a quote. I don't know if that is interesting at all, but there is basically a standard, a notation for this. And I will post it in the chat right now. It's basically called text fragments, and it's interestingly enough not used that much by HTML people, but I think since we're having this PDF in HTML kind of thing, PDF could definitely benefit from this and has a higher, even a higher use case for this. So this is fairly simple to implement.
It's a real shame. Something I was reminded of actually looking at some stuff from CCC the other day is that, I mean, it's frustrating that the PDF world never got behind using destinations, because that basically is an anchor hardwired into the PostScript. Most bookmarks and things like TOCs and stuff are depressingly fragile in PDFs because nobody felt it was worth their bother to implement them properly. The standard allows for it. The idea that I had listening to Andrew describing the problem about, you know, going in and so okay, or say for instance having to have effectively two complete renditions of the text, is that it does one. I do wonder if you could actually essentially print your HTML in the PDF, but render it as if, in other words, you don't show the HTML, so that in the difficulty is that, I mean, I don't know how much people have looked into the internals of a PDF, but the weirdest thing is when you look in there, there's no text. Because what you actually have is something called PostScript, which is a really bizarre language that basically says, draw a glyph this shape, draw a vector shape this shape on this distance on the page, which is why why PDFs are very tied to a paper pagination, because this was all to do with printing, we have to remember. So there isn't a text. You actually have to read out, you have to get the PostScript to do stuff. So when you select something in a PDF reader, what it does is it goes and finds all the PostScript, works out the text it represents, puts it back together as best it can, which is why it sometimes makes mistakes, and says, here's your text. Now, so maybe what we're arguing for is going forward, we need to sort of hold on less tightly to this whole PostScript stuff that doesn't really do us any favors. And employ the fact that the PDF is a portmanteau format. You can put all sorts of things into it and put text in a more usable sense. So in other words, that you know, if Andrew wants to get some text, he's not having to go and look for lots of multiple implementations, which then cause you a further versioning problem because these two may get out of whack. So that essentially you have one representation of the text that may, in its sort of traditional PDF form, look like a printed page, but in fact contains, when you actually call the text, comes back with some form of semantically relevant markup. That would seem a possible. We can't do it today, but that would seem a very sensible way to move forward. Right.
When I started with the whole PhD and visual meta and all of that stuff, I did try to do embeddings. And I got all sorts of problems with security. I even tried embedding a Word document so you could extract it yourself if you wanted to edit the original, and it just wouldn't allow it to happen. But I agree with the approach in general. There are different ways to show or not show. But we do have one really important issue, though, with this, and that is if you, I mean, we could do a hack where we do everything that we've talked about, but if you cite a selection of text, and you give that citation to someone, the mechanism through which they find it is basically by finding that unique string of text in the document. Because the PDF rendering and the HTML rendering will be different no matter what. So we should basically allow them, how do you want to view this, as an HTML bit or as the quote unquote original PDF?
Well, one problem I've sort of found with PDFs is that the text is basically not, it's actually less stable than you'd think because of the PostScript layer, because it's not really stored as text at all. You print it. When you make a PDF, you actually print your text, and there is cleverness that allows people to magic text back out of the PDF. And this isn't to knock the format. It is a sort of genuine technical thing that you have to do. So that there isn't that text, in a sense. I don't know what one's looking for in the PDF.
When author exports to PDF, and with the visual meta, we do one column, and when you select it to extract, it's fine. Anytime you do anything sophisticated with the layout, you get issues. So you're absolutely right. But with a modern PDF rendering engine, it is actually possible to get plain text out of it. And we are talking about going forward.
It's possible, but not consistently possible is the problem. That's what I mean, because I still find with PDFs produced today in seemingly current stuff, it's difficult, and it's worth. But there was a really useful thing that Peter passed. It was a Reddit thing, and it was talking about the problem. There is a whole industry area, things like trying to read tables out of PDF, because it's not impossible. You basically have to write a custom program literally for each production machine. So what that tells us is that there is a degree of complexity. The danger is saying I did it and it works on my thing. I would say my experience is that case doesn't work at scale. So we need to be a little more cautious in being too optimistic.
I got one thing to maybe add, Mark. I am fundamentally I'm agreeing with what you're saying. But also because this is such a relatively small project in the scope of things, like we have one developer on this.
Yep.
Making everything the correct way is perhaps not something that we should hold ourselves to, or we may not get anything done.
Agreed.
So like I'm all on board for like, let's find a smart way to do it. But if the smart way is redesigning something from scratch, let's be like, well, that's a future problem.
It's too big. I totally agree. What I was sort of driving at in this is part of the useful stuff that I think we will render for the grant givers is an understanding of the real problem at issue here, because most people look at the surface layer of it and imagine picture A, picture B in their mind and think, okay, that's sort of
Yeah, but-
doable.
okay, but Mark,
And it's actually, you know, we know it's a little more complicated, and so we can usefully lay this out for them.
okay, but Mark, it works with author and reader, right? And that is one closed system, but it's entirely open. It's an exemplar. So the only issue we have, and this is a real issue, I would absolutely acknowledge, is glyphs sometimes. Not glyphs, excuse me, ligatures. You know, when you have the F and the I, obviously you know what it is, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, which can be programmed around. But the point is, we are trying to present an exemplar system where if all the pieces are done right, it'll work. And I think that is absolutely fine, because that will make it clear that if ACM, etc., don't do all the pieces right, it won't work.
Can
Right.
you? So a useful thing to do is could you make author actually create an ACM format document? I'm not thinking so much two column, which has a complexity of its own. But
Yes,
just for their formats.
100%, but I'm not going to pay for it. But I could, yes.
Okay, but we need some way to prove that point, because at the moment, and I'm not saying this as a critique, but the documents that author can currently produce are much simpler, so I would expect them to have fewer failures.
Yeah, but it's
one
not,
of the
it's not,
problems-
no, but that's the key, Mark. That is the entire key. The key is that the document itself is one thing, the visual meta is something else. The visual meta is super simple. That's why it can be extracted. So we don't have to worry about the entire ACM document or whatever it is. That's just a photograph. This is just a picture in this context. The visual meta is super.
But we haven't defined what the visual meta is, so this is why it's.
No,
I'm
yes,
not to go on
yes,
trust, but we
yeah,
need to
yeah,
define what it is.
Mark, in the sense that it is an introduction and data, we have defined it fully, right? Meaning,
No.
yes, but Mark,
No.
please, this is really important, right? What is inside the data is a very important, useful discussion that's going to take a while. But in terms of extracting it, it is intro and data, and it's in a rectangle.
Sure. I mean, yes.
So that means that in terms of how to put it in for Andrew and take it out for Andrew, that's dumb. The question of what should be in there is still very much on the table.
Yes.
We know where it is. Right. Right. Okay. This is probably a good time, Andrew, to spend time on what you have got to show us. I will. Obviously, the use cases will need some more work, but I'm going to put in the link here to your latest and greatest. For those who have headset. Oh, Mark, are we going to see your headset for the first time? That's exciting.
We'll see. How do I tell Quest 3 to stop thinking it's using hand trackers and to use my hands? Is there a signal I can get?
That's a good question. Andrew, do you know?
So you've got the hand tracking enabled, or
yes,
not
I
even there
have.
yet? Okay.
I think probably the answer is to put these the other side of the room where it won't detect
Yeah,
them.
if the controllers are not on, it won't bother. And it tries to turn them on by default if they're close by. So I just leave them in the box and never worry about it.
Nope. Because I tried your demo earlier and I got as far as a totally grey space, so I did something wrong.
What you should be able to do as well is if the controllers are like on and it headset won't ignore it, is you tap them together twice and you put them down, and that's the signal to the headset to switch to hands.
I'll try that.
Which alpha number are we talking about in the URL?
On the URL, it's the top one. It's by date. So if you go to the page.
40224.
one thing that'd be nice, Andrew, is if you have breaks in the references. It's really long, obviously. I'm not sure which.
I did test that. And I ran into some problems with the current way things are set up. That's not to say it's impossible. It's just I didn't dedicate enough time to solve it. Because essentially the 3JS doesn't know how large Troika text is. So you have to manually tell it how far to leave spaces between them. And if you have word wrap on, so it'll wrap to second lines, 3JS just has no idea where the text is, and you often get text overlapping itself because it doesn't intelligently go to a new line. So that's something I'll have to figure out if we want to start doing line breaks like that.
Okay, so that's an issue for the moment. Fair enough.
Yeah. Troika text has been having a lot of problems in general. Even just from testing, like I get frame rate drops when I have more than like maybe 10 different citation things out. So I'm not really sure if Troika is as robust as it's been advertised as.
Try a special thing.
Yeah, the main thing in this update, you'll notice like it took me 2 weeks. I didn't have one last week, and then it's like there's not much in my dev list. The main thing I was working on was the import-export system. So you can now do your work inside the headset, and then at some point in the Prism menu, you can export. It'll save the whole scene as a JSON file, and you can import those again later. It'll remember where things were. It'll hopefully remember where everything's connected, how things interact with each other, which was something that I thought was going to be easier to do than it was because I wasn't sure how 3JS interacts and saves information. And as it turns out, it's very convoluted. So this may be more of a test rather than a final result. If we move forward and start saving information as visual meta, we'll probably use this code as like a basis and rewrite a lot of it, which is fine. It'll probably work better if we do that. But this is a good test. Because from as much as I've done the initial testing, it does work, which is pretty cool to see. It's kind of a save load system now. And you can send those JSON files to others, and they should be able to load into your environment. Aside from that, though, if you aren't working with the save and export, there really isn't much new in this build, except for there's some text markup now, so you can highlight stuff, which was a request by Dini.
I just wanted to let you know I'm listening, but I'm also
Oh yeah, you're
playing.
fine. Yeah, that's usually how it goes. When you get the headsets on, everyone just kind of tinkers. No problem at all. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some little bugs that I missed with the save and export. I tried going through every use case I could come up with, but that is something to keep in mind. Oh, and I don't have like a visual loading is done bar, obviously. So if you do load in a JSON scene, give it a minute to like properly build in the background. If you try to enter the XR scene before it's built, you just won't get anything. If you care, you can open the console log and it will tell you when it's done loading there, but that's not feasible for most people. For our prototype, I figured it was fine, but obviously long term, we'll want some kind of notification on the screen. We got a lot of UI stuff we got to figure out.
So right now we're in the reference section, and we haven't even decided, in a sense, how to get to it, but we're learning
Right.
about both technical and kind of usability.
Yeah, my understanding is this this might be the last build for a while that works just in the citations. Because we kind of had like a theme for a while. We were testing interactions using the citations as a base. Since now we're talking more about like file formatting and stuff like that, I might switch focus over there, which would be kind of like a new set of builds. No longer in the citation per se. I don't know where I'll put us. And I'll probably pull back a bunch of the interaction and just focus on getting whatever new functionality we decide to work on. And then slowly kind of re-implement stuff that we like and cut the things we don't.
Yeah, so then I'd just like to ask everyone here, including you, despite pretending not to be academic, for the next stage, it seems to me that reading in WebXR is just, nobody's going to want to read a book in there except for maybe Randall because he's experimenting, right? The reason to go into WebXR is to use the huge canvas for interactions. So for this next stage, should we continue to try to explode the documents as an exploded technical diagram? Yes, Mark, I agree, we should get a better term. Or should we interact with the entire library? If we interact with the entire library, then we can do exactly the stuff you have. It's just slightly different what is in it. Let me just remind you briefly what I mean by that.
Yeah, let's try to switch over to the library stuff because we haven't done that yet. That's definitely something that we want to do, and it's worth experimenting with. It's going to take a lot of sort of collaboration between you and me, Fred, where like we have to get exports from your software and imports on my end. So we'll have to talk about that stuff quite a bit.
Okay.
But
is there anything you can do, given your point, the point you made rightly earlier about, well, we can't necessarily build everything in great detail. I mean, are there any shortcuts you can make just to allow us, or allow you to show us something in a sense in terms of the library? In other words, is there a sort of quick thing we could semi-fake to start getting a sense of what it might be? Because I think the really good point you made was we haven't looked at this yet. And until we do look at it, we won't know what new things we're going to discover, which turn out to be problematic in a way we hadn't envisaged.
I think I'm seeing at like an absolute bare basics minimum, and this is pretty easy to start with, is a library is just a very small, probably a JSON export that is just a list of URLs that all go to compatible documents. In this case, it would be the ACM HTML exports. But if we want to start looking into what we were talking about today, as having an entire HTML appended onto the end of the PDF document as visual meta, like let's just go for it. Let's just try it. In which case it would be a list of URLs that all have that. And we'll just assume that a library has already been checked and every file in the library is compatible. So I'm not going to bother with that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
maybe we just do that. That's the starting point.
what I think we should do is very similar, is have a JSON that explains the library. It doesn't actually, it'll have links to the documents, but that's in a sense irrelevant. This should be interactions in the library, just looking at the books, so to speak, right? So the
Yeah,
JSON,
I don't need you to generate that JSON, Fred. The list of the URL things for now, I can do that just in the system because we're only going to have one.
yeah, but that's good. But there's a couple of really important buts. They include if there are any extracted entities from these books or documents rather, they need to be available as part of the JSON. I'll show you why in a second. I think you've seen this, Andrew. Just a quick walkthrough. This stuff we're not going to work on now. This is just some little cutesy idea of working on a document, very Vision OS style. This is basically what you have now, except yours is interactive. So here's the thing, click to view in library, and now we have a big graph. But the key is at the bottom. Can you see the bottom? Sorry, the text thing is over on my view. Let me just go back. So the key is really this. You have a list of, you can have a list, just normal lists in here. They're very useful sometimes. List by author, date, title, obvious stuff, right? Second one is timeline. which would need a little bit of designing, but all the documents can fit on a timeline, right? And then we have this map view. And this is where it might, to have an absolutely massive map view might be useful because of these two things. Oops. So on one side here, on the left, you have, when you select a book, forget what it actually says. These would be titles of documents, right? If you select one, when should you see connection? Should be based on comments, highlights, entities, or what? You know, that's something the user should be able to choose. And on the right, sorry guys, you were actually blocking my view. There we can show what do you want to see on this? Should it be everything, or should it just be people or titles or location, institutions, citations, annotations, whatever? I'm not saying we need to do all of this immediately, but what I am saying is that to start having all these elements and to really work on how they can move around, even if it's static data, I think will put us in an interesting space. Does that make sense?
Right. I think for like obviously that all of that is way too far out. Like we can't start with that.
Oh.
But it's good to have that in mind. I think as a minimum, we'll just have the library be just the names of all the documents in the library, like that's simple. And then if we want to go the next step, we would have maybe the lines draw between documents if they cite each other. That seems like a simple way to start. We can, of course, add more functionality to that later, but I think the big thing we need to do right now is getting one, actually seeing a library of documents, because we've only ever worked with one document at a time. And then two, finding some way of saving that into your visual meta and sending that back and forth. That seems to be like, to me right now, the big technical hurdle.
I'm
And
just
if we
what
just
you're
want
saying.
to,
Agreeing with
okay,
everything.
if for now,
Sorry.
if right now we want to, I don't know how much your suggestion was a suggestion and how much of it was like a let's do this, of taking the document and saving it as HTML inside the visual meta. It technically doesn't have to be HTML, it just needs to be tagged, but that's one way of tagging it. If you are committing to that, that's the direction we can go for now. Ultimately, all I care about is just having the different sections of the PDF. One, easy to access the text without a bunch of like confusing glyphs in there, which is visual meta export. That'd be great. And then also second, tagged into sections where like everything in it is labeled like they are in the HTML file. Like this is a citation, this is a citation line, this is a link in the citation line, this is an author, like all of that stuff. That's really what I need to have access to. And we can decide if that's something that development time should go in on my end, where I find a way of like translating text into that, or if we want to just keep that as a separate thing. I don't think this has to necessarily be something that you develop a workflow for, Frode, because we have the HTML exports already for all of the ACM papers. So
Yeah.
if you just have a way of sticking that on as visual meta, that could work. What are you seeing with this?
First of all, I know Mark's going to bite my knees, but the visual meta can be current ACM stuff just stuck in the back, so to speak. But in the, and this is really important that we're all on the same page on virtual page, PDF page, haha. The JSON thingy should contain all the information about all the documents except the documents themselves, right? So it should have any useful metadata. So if Mark highlights the word chocolate, the JSON should have this document, Mark highlighted the word chocolate. That is really, really important because the annotations that Dini really wants, and I completely agree with her, should also be there. If you write something in the margin, that should be an element that when you're in your library view, you should be able to either search, navigate, or view by.
Is that going to scale? I mean, let's say, so a reasonable library is, what's say, about 1,000 documents. So every annotation in all 1,000 documents that's going to be in the live library JSON file. I'm just wondering if that's going to get a bit big.
No, it's not. Considering video streaming and pictures and stuff, it's going to be fine.
Well, I know I was asking Andrew really because Well, exactly. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult, but genuinely, I've made this mistake myself before. Just said, well, just stick it down the wire, you know. I just don't know how big it feels to me. I'm very conscious Leon's got his hand up too, but it feels to me that the thing we need to experiment with so we can see if that it's going to cause a constraint. If it doesn't, great. If it does, obviously we'll have to think of a different angle of attack.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just talking, which I think this was about the extra data in the library, Jason, I'm not worried about that. You're not sticking the entire document in there, luckily. This is just like a few extra lines of JSON, which is essentially negligible. That's tiny. We start to get into issues when we start saving large amounts of content. This is just like some tags. We are going to get quite a bit of file bloat sticking the entire document in HTML at the end of the document, right? Like that's definitely going to be bloat. Is it enough to be an issue? I'm not sure. It seems a little bit counterintuitive to me right now because if we're using the HTML exports, why aren't we just using the HTML exports? But I understand like
Oh,
we
hang on.
want to have the visual meta in there as like a component.
No. This is why I'm saying that visual meta is basically introduction and data. And this does not have to go on the back of a document. Okay, here's a really simple, specific flow. Mark Anderson is reading a paper that I wrote and has the word chocolate cake in it. He highlights it. And then he also writes in the document somewhere. This is an interesting recipe. In the visual meta at the back of the document, a new appendix will be called highlights. And any highlights from the document will be listed. And another page will have, these are any stuff that he has written. These two things are currently not in the visual meta in Reader, but Reader has it in a database. So that means that when I search my library for the word chocolate, I can see that Mark has highlighted chocolate, and I can open the document, which is useful to me. So when it comes to Reader exporting the JSON, it'll export, and one of the documents will have all the citation stuff and blah, blah, blah. Then it'll have a field highlighted text, a field annotations, just as text in that. And that is a pure normal JSON stream, nothing to do with visual meta. Visual meta is just the notion of having it there when it comes to the JSON stream.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that. I temporarily switched back to talking about the entire export stuck on the end as visual meta, which I'm just commenting on that part, because that's a lot we have to figure out still.
Yeah. I'm just gonna share the screen with you too.
I'm already 10 minutes over. I have got to go.
Okay.
But I don't want to leave mid-discussion.
Just
What
wanted-
specific route do you want me to dive into right now?
Okay, on our website, we have interactions, and then there we have use case. That is what we're building. Under here, we have reading, which is where I'm working with the whole DNI things to make sure it's correct. But now, under library, this is where I think we all agreed we should work on now.
Okay,
So-
start with library.
Yeah, and
That's all I need.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk to the guys here so you can look at it later. Feel free to go. Very good to see you. Thank you for staying late and have a good, anyway, hope to see you on Monday, just later in the day. Bye. Phew, now that the adults are gone, we can talk freely.
I've, by the way, I got the thing working. I got these turned off in the demo, so that
Good,
works.
good. Leon, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that about this demo and about the next steps. I really like this. There is this button on the interface. If you press it, it will basically flip. You know what I mean? Basically, now you see a debug button or something. But I don't know, like if this was already programmed, then we can assume that it's easy to repeat it. Keeping in mind the repetition mantra of user interface design, maybe you could, and now I'm referring to your prototype with the things sliding out on the side, and your use cases, maybe it might be an interesting sort of separation to also introduce some kind of flip mechanism there, where you basically would flip from a micro, let's say the document is a micro view with perhaps some use cases or things sliding out. But if you would flip it, you could flip to the macro view of things, which means a library view or a perhaps this the meta view where you see the wires, that screen you showed. Yeah, I was just thinking about that because from a practicality and pragmatist point of view, I think it's very easy to implement. And in the second, the second reason is that if you want to move fast with the implementations, then maybe it's easy to focus on replacing the current document from if you click something in the library, and then not really caring yet about having all kinds of documents sort of instancing on the side and whatever. If you can get that right, so basically the library view and opening a new document or replacing the current document, and somehow getting this metadata saved, that would already be a huge step. I think if you would immediately go all in, like, yeah, I want to have multiple documents, that might be a bit too much to handle for a one-person developer. That's just some thoughts I had. I don't know how fast you want to move into multiple documents, but
Well, here's the thing. In reading in native on the Vision Pro is much higher resolution than WebXR, unfortunately. So that means that from my Reader app, I'm trying to fulfill some of the requirements there, so we don't have to do them in WebXR, because Reader does simpler stuff, but it does it cleanly. So that's why it's so important to be able to be in one environment, click a button, and then you go to another. And that's why I think that the whole library thing is really, really important. By the way, both of you are coming up for a Future Tech Social in June, right?
I am discussing this with the boss
Okay.
here in the house.
Likewise, I don't know my June schedule at the moment, but possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I hope we can, and then you can play with this.
Oh, that's
I'm
a
just
good teaser.
thinking. Sorry, I did just needed on the thing of the library. Do we actually have any recent sort of actual sort of data or observation work on people using their libraries in the loose sense of the word? Because the funny thing is, I find whenever I talk to fellow academics about their library, everyone starts to look at their shoes, because it's like that thing that you never really talk about, because everyone's worried that theirs is messier than it's that kind of thing. People don't like to talk about referencing and stuff because it's just something nobody wants to do. And I guess it's like the teenage sex joke. Everyone else is doing it better. In fact, no one's doing it at all. And so I sort of wonder, because I was trying to think, okay, so how do I actually interact with my library of documents, and why do I do it? And to the extent to when I do it deliberately, because I want something that I wouldn't get by just clicking a link in the document. And what I'm trying to do is get my hands on the edge of what the real metadata needs to be in there. Because it's terribly easy to imagine in the mind's eye a nice interaction that happens that sounds really good, and then it turns out to actually be really good, but it doesn't actually do anything useful. It does what it set out to do, but actually that wasn't really, you realize that wasn't actually what you wanted to do.
Leon, please, I'm trying to share something with you guys. And
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. What if the cold, harsh truth is that most academics' library is just a Dropbox or a G Drive? Is that a cold truth? Or is that what most
yes.
people read? Yeah.
I'm I'm not going to say what, no, I think I think it is. It's one of the things. I mean, I remember trying to get the doctoral college I was working for said, well, you know, to actually ask all the people that they were funding to do degrees, what they actually did to do their referencing, and so of course you had one or two people you knew did really good stuff because you saw them using it all the time, and everybody else was sort of looking out the window and you know, I don't know, they were probably just typing it straight into Word or something. I don't know. It's difficult, which adds to the problem of trying to work out, well, what would you want to do? It's like, I find it really interesting. Lots of people said to me with the hypertext set, oh, it would be really useful if we had all the organizations in there. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, I could look at the organizations. Why? And that, well, because it would be really useful. Why? And it turns out that actually isn't very useful because people move around. You have an author with 7 people, and so our notion we have the simplistic notion that you know, although 1 or 2 people may work somewhere their entire career, that's actually quite rare. So place and affiliation are actually far less useful than you'd imagine.
Mark, could you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I see.
No, not my desktop. I'm going to try to hang on. I'm going to try to share my view here. I think it's this one. Because my screen goes black while this happens.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But it's trying.
The control screen goes black just as you're trying to use it.
It's working. Leon, please go ahead and please tell me if you, whenever change. Okay, right now you see it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, we're seeing it.
Okay, so this is this is what I've done. Look at this. Really cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah,
And this is multiple pages, or yeah.
it's multiple pages. I'm just moving so I don't have the screen there. So to me, this is really sharp reading. I can read this super comfortable. The thing is, it couldn't fit in the space, and we can't easily curve with this. So that's why we just made it like this.
Mm.
And that's why I asked them to try to, if there was visual meta, to just not show it. And with that knowledge, we should have an easy way to say that, by the way, you can see my hand, right?
We can, yes.
Yes,
Yeah, we can.
yes.
Yeah. It's
So
cool.
there's references. If that's indicated even by the end user, that should be able to disappear from this view, but have it separate. So you can do the thing Dean was talking about. You come across a reference, you tap on it, and you see here what it is. All these things are possible easily here.
When you open that reference, what are you going to do with the paper?
No, I'm saying it would be separate. Like you would have maybe the paper here, and then
Yeah, no, I just wondered, the question was genuine and open-ended in the sense that it's something else I've been trying to sort of take more of a note of, because I'm aware that actually that looking at another paper itself is a whole actually grab bag. About the only common factor is it involves opening another document. But actually what one's doing, it's interesting because a lot of the time you probably don't, if you had some more information stored, you probably wouldn't need to open the document. So, I mean, an interesting one is often you're opening the document just so you can get the visual recognition of the cover page. Say, oh, that's the one I thought it was. Yes, you know, I can tell by the typeface, it's 20 years old. That's the one. Which is telling you probably that your memory isn't as great as it used to be. But it'll be interesting. I just don't know. I haven't seen anyone who's done any, that, you know, so someone who's done a sort of study of what people are actually doing there, because it's really quite pertinent to this. And we can make, and we're imagining, but we are in the process of making all sorts of cool interactions where we basically traverse from document to document based on the fact that we know they're linked by citation. The next thing is to get into the point of, okay, but what were they there? I mean, the truth is most people cite really badly. So you follow the citation, oh, great. And now you've got a 300-page book from which some
my-
words may have come. So again, there's some interesting stuff to drill down to in this.
But yeah, I think definitely we need to fantasize that this is the most incredible environment the world can ever see. You know, we're inventing that. So when it comes to even the metadata, I think we can really say, if people follow our way of doing it, this is the benefits they get, right? By the way, this is writing in this space. Look at the size of this thing. Can, of course, make it bigger.
Yeah, no, I was pushing down on the fact that it's slightly more granular to say that if you're going to do this, you will get a benefit, and you will get the benefit if you actually bother to cite more closely. The trouble is, I'm not sure a lot of people would really like that, because they may or may not have read the document they're citing.
Ooh, I know another killer feature, Frode, for author.
Okay.
I would love, when I saw that 6-page article, I was thinking like, oh, I've always wanted to have a sort of to enforce to the user that they read all these 6 pages sort of next to each other's, because they're really they're referring to each other. I would love to build a PDF which somehow allows me to specify that it's supposed to be rendered 6 pages at a time. So if you do next page, then you will get the next 6 pages. In other words, I would love to write a book which is designed to be read for 6 pages, or a technical article with infographics where on page 1 and 2 I have text, 3 and 4 the infographic, and on the last 2 pages some more text, so that you can make a complete, basically a spatial document. It's 2D, but that would be really epic. And I think you already got the viewer part down. That was reader, right?
So I will say the same thing to both of you in response to that. Let's just do it. I mean, if we in September have a version of the article that we're submitting or something else, and it's written in a different way, presented in a different way, using different metadata, as long as it's compelling when someone puts the headset on, you know, that's a sales pitch. If we do it kind of like halfway, you know, then it's just, yeah. So yeah, I think that's a very good idea. From what I understand that you're saying is very much Mark Anderson style of, you know, be slightly aware of what you're writing for, what kind of medium, what kind of substrate, what kind of display. So if you can write it in a more clearly contextualized manner, which is what ACM documents try to do, you know, there's an abstract title and all of that, right? We can absolutely do that. And, you know, I so desperately want to be able to have 3D things in documents that will appear traditionally fine, because one of our key things here, this has to somehow be savable in a traditional, and then exploding and then, yeah. And that doesn't mean, obviously, there has to be a technical thing. It can be exactly what you're saying. It can be, here are the different things viewed in this way. That was one of our kind of earliest discussions here, and I think we have confused our way.
The exploding thing is in a sense just another riff on the idea of something knowing what it is. Its ability to deconstruct is based on the fact that it knows it's not one monolithic thing. Exactly. And obviously we've got to explore what that unpicks as. I mean, we know some headline things, but that's, you know, the first couple come for free sort of thing. But actually digging into to what does it mean to give us the richness we want? I suspect it will be fun. But I was thinking when you were saying about it, sort of like having a 6-up page, as if you're working from a start like a PDF, which is inherently basically has already been printed into page-sized blocks. You have blocks of a known size. So if you want to tessellate 6 of them together, then a display space should find that, I imagine, fairly easy to do, because it's not like the pages are all different lengths. for instance, or different widths, they're all going to be consistent sizes. So if you just wanted to, you know, have 3 columns of 2 sort of thing, your display space needs to say, give me 6 pages and put them in the 6 slots in this order.
This is why we have 2-hour discussions, because now we're 2.5 hours and we're really digging deep. But absolutely right. I mean, you should be able to author a document and do something as simple as this. This is a 6-page document. And then in XR, you open your own document, put it in certain thing, and then you have an ML over there with some extra intelligence commenting on it. You have this and that. And then when you send the document, you send a PDF, but in the PDF it states, this is a expanded document. If you open it up in an XR environment, these other resources will be pulled in and this display will be shown. This is so basic and crucial. You know, we have to decide on what use cases to support for these kinds of interactions.
Well, we have 3 use cases. I mean, are we saying we don't have enough use cases, or I thought we had 3, and is the problem that the 3 we have aren't written out enough? This is where I'm a bit confused.
The use cases we have, I think obviously Dini is completely right. She is the academic in the group, so to speak, senior. But to me, it was more research questions. I'll show you. You know, as I'm preparing to write, editing, and assessing a graduate seminar paper, I think this one is a bit niche for only professors.
Well, you said, funny enough, but it's probably the most interesting because it takes you down the rabbit hole, all the things you've talked about, like stuff you did talk to Les about, like where are the citations turning up? Because what you're needing to do in that is, so the use case 3 is effectively is almost like an audit.
I agree. It's deep reading.
Sorry? No, it's not deep reading, actually, funny enough.
Sorry, I didn't mean deep reading like that. I just mean it is proper reading, you know, to comment back either for you. Anyway.
Well, what's interesting in that one is, in a sense, that one of the things when you're doing that is you are actually in your mind trying to explain the wretched document to make it tractable to yourself. So actually, that's really interesting. The second one is assimilation, where that to me is more pulling the bits together and doing the assemblage of these parts that will fit into the box. And the first one I think was just I missed it, it's gone now, but it's general reading. The question is, how many use cases have we got? How do we actually have the time and the resources for?
What?
Well, you know, there's only so much time and there's a limited amount of resources, certainly in terms of, you know, the programming.
This is what you were talking about a little bit. Re-implement the document. That's sorry, who said that?
Yeah, I think that, yes. So when you were showing me the use cases, so for instance, you know, actually looking at your thesis at the moment, one of the things that it's interesting. So I'm reading a richly structured document whose structure I don't yet get. So I don't know where this thing was explained or if it's going to be. I don't know, because I'm the reader and it's all new to me. And this is, and so the questions I have are not at this point in any form of a judgment on the document. They are a sort of a list of things I don't know, which I'm trying to ascertain as part of the understanding, just to read it. That was sort of in my mind as you talk about the use case 3, which is probably the most interesting of the 3, because it causes us to want to think about what elements of the document do we want to get our hands on, and explain to ourselves why. Because it's normally the writing down of it. This goes back to my question about people say they want to have, you know, organizational information, but when you ask them why, normally they don't come up with an answer. And as I write a lot of documentation, I've also learned that writing it down generally teaches me I understand less than I thought I did about it. So that's sort of what's in my mind's eye in terms of trying to flesh out the use cases. Whether we need more, because we've got to watch how the work scales.
I think maybe the editing part might be, we might benefit from limiting that to annotating and highlighting and notes. instead of editing the document themselves. You're
I
not going
think
to
in
edit.
fairness, that's what
You're not
Dini was
going to
meaning.
edit a Hamlet document. I'm not going to edit that one.
No, I think what Dini was referring to was acting in an editor's role. In other words, people are sending me stuff for approval. So I mean, in a sense, it's probably also akin to doing peer review of papers. So someone sends you something, and you're just, in a sense, going through. Does it make sense? Is it coherent? Is it all there? Is it full of typos? So arguably, you could say it's a bit like number 2 and number 3. It's just that I think the interesting thing in the third point is that if you're looking at more than looking at paragraph 2 and did it meet the rubric and do I give them 3 marks or 4, is saying, oh, that's interesting. Well, why are all the references in the first section? Or being able to do something like, I'm going to expect the following things which I have in my library. Do they, cross match? Are they there? All sorts of interesting things that you can begin to do. No one will ask them now because they can't do them and they probably can't imagine them. Because they wouldn't sort of think to do that, and they will explain to you seriously why you're wrong and that you should do it the old way. But I do think once there's more metadata, some of this sort of comparison stuff that we want to do and either don't do or do with difficulty will become easier, which actually frees up time to actually interact with the story, as it were.
Please have a look at this and tell me if you agree. So hang on, let me just lift it up. There we go.
Why are they deciding to put on their headset? Why don't they just put it on? It's sort of the extra. I find the extra words confusing because that you're doing something to get to the place we're going that actually isn't relevant to the end point. Why not just say an academic is working and puts on their headset?
I think it's
because we don't care why. They're going to do some work. It's just clearer. It's much crisper and clearer. Otherwise, you get into lots of extra parenthetical clauses, and the sentences are really hard to read, and it's not clear what you're actually doing. Okay. So we could cover that almost in one sentence.
Okay. The point is to show that you do different words in different systems. Right. That's really kind of important.
Right. I would take those out and list them. I can tell you, because I've been reading a lot of sentences like this, they're really hard to read. They're tiring to read and they're not clear. If you want to have a list, make a list, because that's essentially what you're doing, and you will be much clearer to the reader. So we're going to do this. We're doing this work, and the reason is boom, 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 boom. You can make a bulleted list. You can make a numbered list if you want, but then the things being listed are much clearer. So you've got about 4 things you want to do in there. So they're going to put on their headset and they want to interact with their documents in a more extended environment. I don't know what that means.
What do you mean you don't know what it means?
A more extended environment.
Visually.
Right. Bigger. So yeah, but you're assuming that somebody I know, because I spent time talking to you about this, but I'm just trying to say that, sorry, I spend a lot of time writing for people who, exactly like myself, people who ought to be bright enough to understand but don't. And I know, because they write and they tell me in no uncertain terms that something I thought was plain. So I'm not trying to be clever here. I'm reflecting something that I live through all the time. And what it's taught me is to write less and more succinct, and so less long text, more structure. People can read it much more easily.
Well, is the reader of this document academic?
It's anybody. It's probably people who know less about XR than we do, which is the key.
Because it's a bit of a yeah. So these words Frode is using does make me excited, and yeah, I guess yeah, maybe yeah, I totally see your point. Like if I write a spec, then I also have to strip it from all kinds of exciting words or concepts. But then incredibly not exciting to read. So yeah, I guess
I take the point, but I also sort of
Guys,
found, having sort of experimented with some of this, is the thing is that
Mark, this is it's
excitement people who, you know, if that's what people are coming for, they're coming for excitement, they will, but the excitement's easier when you have some idea of what's going on. And I'm really, what I'm thinking is, if I'm the person who made the grant, reading the report and thinking, did I get my money's worth? I don't actually want lots of hyperbole.
Yeah, but this is not for that. This is for us. This is, we are the target users here. This is not for anyone else.
Right.
People
So
are
what we need to understand, what we're doing. I'm excited already. I don't need to get more excited. I need to understand what I'm doing.
Okay, Mark, this is not poetry. All I'm saying is that there's a difference between working on a traditional display and working in an XR headset. That's all covered in the first sentence. The reason that we are building the software is to use that space, because that's because of the limitation of WebXR. If you want to work on a small document, you can do that on the Vision natively because it's crisp and clear, right? So the use case that we're supporting here is to try to use the space as Andrew's developing it. And here it's just saying they go to a web page and they have their own library. You know, it's really not that important. It's just for our own clarity. What we need to agree on are these two things here. What are the sorts of things they should be able to do in there? Because this is going to be our Bible.
Yeah, so in that second thing, the second two lines want breaking out into discrete things, so you can see what they are, instead of also this and then that and then something else, because it's much clearer to the reader who's reading it for the first time what it means. It's very easy to write a sentence and just keep putting commas in and ands, but they are very unreadable.
Okay, I'm going to.
So if you take that second.
No, hang on. I will do that, but hang on first. I want to make sure we make Beanie happy. That's obviously one of our jobs, right? So I'm just going to copy her research things, and then I'm going to go back to that page. The use case, I'm going to paste it at the bottom of the page for our reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bang, bang, right. Okay, so where are we talking? While in the library or above?
So in that second paragraph, everywhere you put a comma, select it and hit return. So turn it into a new line, and you'll begin to see what you're actually writing about. So every and every comma make a line break, just so you can see, because there's actually quite a lot in there. So we've got an author and title, a timeline, a citation tree, and based on other attributes of the document, which doesn't actually mean anything except including those listed. That, yeah, I don't understand what that means.
You know what list? Don't be pedantic.
No, I'm sorry. Look, when I say to you, I don't understand. I'm really not. I'm actually being totally honest. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to say that it doesn't read on the page as it does in your mind. So we're going to get. We want to see their documents. It's like throwing everything in the wall. It's.
I'm just, while we're working on this, this is to enable the user to a bit so that we connect the research questions to this.
Sure. Yeah.
These two next ones are less in the library and more while reading, right?
You see, when you say based on author and title, but also in the timeline. So I think what you're saying is you want to see them basically listed in some form based on author or by title. And I mean, the point is, but also in the timeline. I think what you're actually saying, and it will be useful to have a timeline view as well, but that's not actually how it reads on the page, is what I'm trying to say.
Fine, we can do that now. Well, in the library, you should be able to choose how their documents are listed. based on author and title.
Well, I'd say listed, and then, well, author and title is a type of list, I presume, or whether they're separate. This is what happens when it all's agglomerated. It turns out it's just less clear. So the timeline is also a different sort of display. So by option, we're already saying that we assume the default will be author and title. That's what I read.
That's fine.
No, is that what you meant? I'm just saying that's what I read from that's what I understand from what's written. If that isn't, then let's make it as it should be. So there's nothing wrong with the option. I'm just trying to get to the point. So what you're saying is they choose how to see that.
It's arbitrary. Whatever they had lost could be the one they view. So I can happy to change it to it should also be. Yeah.
Okay, right. So what we're actually getting, we're getting into it. So now basically, why don't we, first of all, just list the types of things that we think without deciding which is what, just make a little list rather than try and put it into a sentence where it obscures the meaning. So when you get are listed based on colon, new line, and then just humor me, just make a list of those things, and we can maybe mash it back into a sentence when we've worked out what we want in the list and what the constituents are, because otherwise it's not clear.
It's just we have a lot of lists on the site.
Yeah, we can deal with that later. Don't worry about the formatting. What I really meant was just put a line break in so that we can see what are the discrete things that we're thinking of. So we want so we basically got 4 view specs, and I'm not suggesting the words we use, but what I take from this is we're imagining there being probably 4 discrete view specs, all of which can probably be configurable.
But by the way, of note, Dini doesn't really like us referring to Doug too much, but she thinks it's too much. I haven't referred to him in months, but she brought it up recently. So Doug language with her, we should be.
But that's fine, but we're not going to write that on the page. I'm just trying.
I agree with you. It is essentially a view spec. Yeah.
So, all right, displays, layouts, call them what you will. So now that basically, I mean, there's always scope for others and things, but again, the danger is overloading it and then putting and so on at the end. So we think essentially that we can envisage at least 4 different display types.
Mm-hmm.
So you can now basically roll that up after the colon. You can now graph map based on. Based on other attributes of the document doesn't really tell me anything. If you mean a graph or map based on, based on metadata in the documents, that's enough to describe what you're describing. I just think it's shorter. Yeah, now you're making it longer. Now you're adding in more confusing stuff that the reader has to understand. You had it, you just need to say a graph. Do you want to draw a distinction between a map and a graph? Is that even helpful? Why? Or you could just say a map. Graph is more technical, so I would say map. More people will understand it, and you could just say a map based on other attributes of the documents. End of sentence. The rest of it is not needed to inform someone as to the use case. And then you've got 4 short. Now you've got 4 short phrases that you can comma join. So you can, if you remove the bullets, so after the colon.
The bullets are fine. They really are.
Okay, fine.
Otherwise, in WordPress, it goes off funny space.
Yeah, well, rather, I hate having to use a WordPress site at the moment. I use it. So the second one is, so you should be able to toggle between these views and save them. Yep. We probably need to put so many alsos in. It becomes a tick. It's self-evident that if they need to be done, they need to be done. So you don't. The also is redundant. Um, So, Leon, what do you think? Because I'm conscious that you're reading it in a second language, which is another point about clarity.
Well, I agree with the. Well, so far everything is clear. I find it quite an exercise to pretend is as if I'm not part of this group and read it. I do agree that I like the sort of trimming the fat, what has been done so far. It does take me some extra mind power. The limited mind power I have, I need to focus on one sentence. If there is a summary afterwards, which is sort of extending on it, that makes it a bit harder to read. So I guess that's what you meant with the comma stuff.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, it's terrible because it always feels like a sort of a critique of style, and that's not really the issue. It's what the core thing is almost to write down the shortest possible description, and then you can turn it into sort of nicer prose. The temptation is in trying to cover all the things, which we tend to know. We know the edge. Is it goes on the page, and actually it doesn't need to, because it's as you get into the scenario, it's sort of evident. If we need to have a manifest of particular things, we could write a sort of effectively turn the use case into more of a spec at a time when that seems pertinent. But I think in just terms of us being able to quickly show people broadly what we're about, because there's only a limited amount that people read before they get bored, unless they're interested, and we don't know if they're
But
interested.
Mark, this is not for other people, this is for us. It's just a listy
Yeah.
thing to refer to while developing.
So maybe we should also be careful to not like I really think that Mark has actually I wish I could hire Mark on a daily basis to do this with me, but I guess we should also decide when should we have Mark really go full in, and which texts are not as important. Or yeah, I'm not really sure what the criteria is.
I just
Or
think,
maybe-
it's just, I think, to be fair, I don't think they're unimportant. I think it's the best way I can describe it is just how tiring do you want it to be for the reader who doesn't know this, and it's terribly difficult to do it for your own. I find it incredibly difficult to do for my own writing. I rely on a small number of people who I know will be absolutely red in tooth and claw, and they're normally right, because it's like doing your own maths homework. You keep making the same mistake on line one, and there's no real error in it. It's because you know the words that you wrote down, they broadly make sense.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I think we have now, we've written it, we've reviewed it. Is this, what do you think, Frode? Is this now something which is more or less finished, or do you want more review?
I think it's fascinating how, as you can see right now, Kent Bie, the XR guy, when I asked him, is there anything to add to the list, he sent me this massive amount of text, which I'm grateful for, but it's basically wasted because it's just in a Twitter chat. But I'm going to turn it into an article now. I'm going to send it to him and say, what do you think? We should all think about it. But it's a ridiculous way to communicate, right? I think we're basically done. So this is our website now. So research questions, what Dini said, and then it says these questions should be addressed by the use case. Click on the use case, reading. while in the library should be able to do this, while reading a document should be able to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you should be able to do currently. If I go back out, and back out, sorry, and then user stories, these are nice things,
Mhm.
right? I should be able to use my hands. I should be able to do this and that. This is where I'd like to keep adding as we think
Yeah.
of things. To
They're nice and short as well.
yeah, and it's to make it's to make the use case more special.
Actually, I think the two of you are kind of like a golden duo, because I think the moment Frode is writing, Frode can really write in an exciting way, and when he goes too far, then Mark Anderson jumps into the ring, and I think that that's a really good combination.
That makes sense. Yeah, so I'm going to work a little bit more on this, just connecting these things and getting these other people's kind of comments in here, like and see this could very easily become an article, you know. So anyway, I'll send some kind of result tomorrow morning.
Okay, I'm going to
Right.
put something very quickly that I explain why I'm going to put it in the I mentioned the chat. I'll put it in the Slack. Is someone demonstrated a system called Dash, which has been made by Andy Van Dam and colleagues at Brown University since about 2015. Annoyingly, there's really little published about it, but I think it's being bankrolled by Microsoft and Adobe, as far as I can work out. And the demo, there's about an hour recording. It was a sort of Tinderbox community meetup, but one of the guys who works on the project was sort of showing it. So, and it's my sense is that it's a bit like it's a solution looking for a problem. But what was interesting is I found myself thinking of the conversation we had a while back, and somebody, it might have been Peter, had suggested it would be useful if you had little affordances around something showing what they could do. And when I was watching the Dash demo, there was a lot of that going on, and I found it far less intrusive than I thought I would. So I made note to self, you know, don't be prematurely prejudiced about this as an approach. And I thought it's there because it's something being used on a running system. I don't care to say, I mean, I don't know what the system is really for, to be honest. It's supposedly a sort of broadly web-based hypertextual system, and I think mainly what they do is they constantly get new classes of students in and say, put all your stuff here, and they do. The problem is that with doing that is they're never really trying to do any synthesis, which is where the hard part comes in when you're doing sort of tools for thought and communication. It's one thing to throw everything on the wall. It's another to turn it into something that someone can understand. But I don't say that. I absolutely don't say that to be harsh. I think it's very interesting. It's been done by people with real sort of chops in this sort of broad domain. So I thought it might be interesting for that reason. Anyway, so I'll put that in. I'll put a link in the Slack. As I say, it's just a recording of another meeting. You can probably just run it at high speed and stop when you see something interesting.
Cool.
I don't think you're going to go away feeling massively enlightened about what Dash is, but I just thought the sort of the interface and the interaction was interesting. Oh, and it's 2D.
I saw a YouTube I need to share with you before we go. You just reminded me. No, it's not trance music, although I'll be happy to share that too. Andy Clark.
Okay.
Just want to make sure it's shared properly. We all basically know what he's talking about, but I was listening to it last night and it was really, yeah, very, very good. Leon, your hand is still up. Hello.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. How crazy is it for the next future of textbook to that, for example, I and somebody else together create a sort of like 6-page block in the book that the moment you open it in the reader, that you get this sort of almost like a presentation worth of the whole topic, what is being discussed, as a sort of like a and that basically reader detects it from the PDF that is supposed to be rendered as a 6-pager. How awesome would that be? Because that would create a completely different collaboration than just, oh, can you write a page for this? Can you write a page? No, it's more like you're building some kind of experience with another writer. I'm sorry, I cannot let go of this this thing you showed me. It's a very inspiring, almost disruptive new take at PowerPoint presentations and vertical scrolling websites. It's a sort of this is a very interesting new use case of PDF.
Mark, answer that question for me, please, sir.
What?
Oh, it's not a question. It's like
The
it's
question
more,
was rhetorical, and the question was, how cool would that be? And
Yeah.
the whole that's the whole point of doing this stuff.
Yeah.
It would be super cool. That that it's that simple. I'm just saving
Yeah.
this.
I think is there going to be a new Future of Text book?
Yes, and we were
Because
supposed
then
to,
I will.
supposed to
Then
talk
I
about
will.
it today.
Okay, because then I am going to basically commit to writing somehow a 6-pager, either alone or together with somebody else, and then I will also submit a feature request to Author or Visual Meta to basically for something in Visual Meta where I can say at this page render 6 pages.
So,
something.
so your page will have to be a fold out then. So when we get to your Oscar, I have to fold out into 6 pages.
I mean, the truth of that is that is absolutely my dream.
Yeah.
Right, and it is. I think it is very, very important to do that. Very, very important to do that.
Yeah, but because for me something like that makes it much more exciting to write something because of the final projection. I would
Yeah.
then I would actually tweet it. I would tweet this screen with the, look what I made and how you can check it in XR. I don't really see people screenshotting their one page of PDF because it has been done. Yeah, it's nothing new under the sun, I guess. You also cannot really screenshot a PowerPoint or some kind of keynote because it's only one page. And with this, you can really have like, bam, super impressive.
I was
So,
thinking
yeah,
for your app, Leon, you
yeah.
see, you'd need a paper article that had pop-up windows and cuts through, so you can actually view onto other pages. Have you seen? I don't know why I've got it. The book of trees. Somebody made a book, and it's all done with cutouts. Through you read the book by looking through the cutouts. I'll
Really?
find it for another meeting. It's Stephen Fors. It was only a small run of books, so you only find it easily. It's on my shelf of weird hypertextual type books.
Oh, sounds awesome.
All right. I have to go down to the family. And
Thank you very much.
thank you for today. That was a long session, but I'm very, very happy. Thank you very, very, very much. I look forward to seeing you on Monday if we can arrange the time zones, if it fits. If not, I'm sure we have other means through which we can communicate.
And safe flight, importantly.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.